Chapter 1. The scent of fear hit Eliza Fitzgerald like a physical blow the moment she stepped into the lecture hall. She froze in the doorway, her nostrils flaring as her heart hammered against her ribs. The smell was coming from everywhere: sweat, anxiety, the metallic tang of blood from someone who'd bitten their lip too hard. 3 weeks ago, she wouldn't have noticed any of it. Now it was overwhelming. "Get it together," she whispered, forcing herself to move toward her usual seat in the third row. The other students filed in around her, chattering about weekend plans and upcoming exams, oblivious to the waves of scent and emotion rolling off them in thick, nauseating clouds. Something was wrong with her. Very wrong. Dr. Sebastian Crow entered the room with predatory grace, his dark eyes scanning the students like a hunter surveying prey. Eliza's skin prickled with awareness as his gaze lingered on her for a heartbeat too long. She'd been having the dreams about him for 2 weeks now, violent, passionate dreams that left her gasping and covered in sweat, her sheets torn to shreds by fingernails that seemed sharper than they should be. "Today we're discussing genetic mutations," Dr. Cross announced, his voice carrying easily through the lecture hall. "Specifically, dominant traits that can remain dormant for generations before manifesting under the right conditions." Eliza's pen snapped in her grip. The plastic cracked with a sound like breaking bones, and she stared at the pieces in her palm, watching a thin line of blood well up where a sharp edge had cut her skin. The wound was already healing, the edges knitting together faster than humanly possible. "Miss Martinez." Dr. Cross's voice cut through her panic. "Perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts on genetic dormancy?" Every head in the room turned toward her, but Eliza only saw him. Sebastian Crow stood at the front of the class, perfectly still except for the slight flare of his nostrils. His dark hair was swept back from a face that belonged in a Renaissance painting, all sharp angles and classical beauty that should have been cold but somehow burned with an inner fire. He was watching her with the focused intensity of a wolf that had caught the scent of wounded prey. Eliza's voice came out rougher than intended. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I think some traits manifest when the individual is under stress. Or when they encounter the right trigger." "Interesting theory." Dr. Cross's lips curved in what might have been a smile, but there was nothing warm about it. "And what kind of trigger might awaken something that's been sleeping?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning Eliza couldn't quite grasp. Around her, the other students shifted restlessly, sensing the tension without understanding it. She could smell their confusion, their discomfort, and underneath it all, something else, something wild and dangerous that seemed to be calling to her. "Proximity," she said quietly. "Being near others of the same type." The word hung between them like a challenge. Dr. Cross's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Eliza could have sworn she saw something inhuman flicker in their depths. Then he turned away, launching into a lecture about recessive genes and inheritance patterns, but Eliza barely heard a word. Her entire body was on fire, every nerve ending crackling with an energy that made her want to run or fight or do something violent and immediate. The rest of the class passed in a blur of scientific terminology and barely controlled panic. Eliza took notes automatically, her handwriting growing increasingly erratic as her hands shook. By the time Dr. Cross dismissed them, she was drenched in sweat and desperate to escape. She was halfway to the door when his voice stopped her cold. "Miss Martinez. A word, please." The other students filed out, casting curious glances over their shoulders. Eliza's feet felt like lead as she turned back toward the front of the classroom. Dr. Cross was gathering his papers with deliberate slowness, waiting until the last student had left before looking up at her. "Close the door." It wasn't a request. Eliza's hand moved to the handle without conscious thought, turning the lock with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. When she turned back, Dr. Cross was standing much closer than he'd been before, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes and smell the wild, earthy scent that clung to his skin. "Your exam," he said, holding up a paper covered in her handwriting. "Perfect score. Every question answered correctly, including the extra credit problems I designed to be impossible." Eliza's mouth went dry. She'd barely remembered taking the exam, her hand moving across the paper as if guided by instinct rather than conscious knowledge. The answers had simply appeared in her mind, complete and certain. I studied, she said weakly. Did you? Dr. Cross moved closer, and Eliza found herself backing toward the wall. Or did you simply know? The way you knew to answer my question about genetic triggers just now? He was close enough to touch now, his body radiating heat that made her skin tingle. Eliza pressed her back against the cool concrete wall, trying to create distance between them, but there was nowhere to go. You're not like the others, are you, Eliza? His voice dropped to a whisper that seemed to vibrate through her bones. You've been changing. Sensing things you shouldn't be able to sense. Having dreams that feel more real than your waking life. Her breath caught. How do you? Because I know what you are. His fingers brushed her wrist, and the contact sent electricity racing up her arm. What you're becoming. And I've been waiting for you. The words hit her like a physical blow. Eliza stared up at him, seeing her own reflection in his eyes, wide with shock and something that might have been recognition. Deep inside her chest, something wild and powerful stirred to life, responding to his nearness like a flame reaching toward oxygen. I don't understand, she whispered. You will. His thumb traced across her pulse point, and she could feel her heartbeat accelerating under his touch. Soon, you'll understand everything. The dreams, the changes, the way your body knows mine even though we've never met before. We have met before. The words spilled out before she could stop them. In my dreams. You're always there, watching me, hunting me. Hunting you? Dr. Cross's smile was sharp and predatory. Oh, Eliza. I'm not hunting you. I'm claiming you. Before she could respond, he stepped back, creating distance between them that felt like a physical loss. Eliza's skin burned where he'd touched her, and she had to resist the urge to reach for him, to close the gap he'd created. Go home, he said, his voice returning to its normal professorial tone. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll begin your real education. Eliza stood frozen against the wall, watching as he gathered his things and headed for the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back at her with eyes that seemed to glow in the fluorescent lighting. Oh, and Eliza? You might want to invest in stronger locks. The old ones won't hold much longer. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Eliza alone in the empty classroom. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, her legs too shaky to support her weight. Her wrist still tingled where he'd touched her, and she could smell his scent lingering in the air, wild and dangerous and utterly intoxicating. Something was happening to her. Something that went far beyond enhanced senses and violent dreams. Dr. Sebastian Crow knew what it was, and somehow, that knowledge was more terrifying than the changes themselves. She sat there for a long time, staring at the empty room and trying to make sense of what he'd said. Claiming her. The words echoed in her mind, carrying implications that made her stomach clench with fear and something else, something that felt disturbingly like anticipation. Finally, she forced herself to stand and gather her things. The hallway outside was empty, most of the students having left for the day. Eliza walked toward the exit in a daze, her mind replaying every word of their conversation. She was so distracted that she almost missed the woman standing by the campus coffee cart. Almost. The woman was Asian, probably in her 30s, with short black hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She was dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket, but something about her posture screamed law enforcement. Eliza might not have noticed her at all if not for the way she was watching the biology building with focused intensity. Their eyes met across the quad, and Eliza felt a chill run down her spine. The woman's gaze was assessing, cataloging, the look of someone who was hunting. But unlike Dr. Cross, this woman's attention didn't make Eliza's skin burn with awareness. Instead, it made her want to run. The woman didn't follow as Eliza hurried toward the parking lot, but Eliza could feel her presence like a weight between her shoulder blades. Someone else was watching her now, someone who wasn't a professor with cryptic warnings and burning touches. Eliza's hands shook as she fumbled with her car keys. The dreams, the changes, Dr. Cross's words, and now this stranger with cop eyes, it was all connected somehow. She could feel the threads of something larger closing around her, a web she didn't understand but couldn't escape. As she drove home through the darkening streets, Eliza caught herself checking the rearview mirror every few seconds. The woman from the coffee cart was nowhere to be seen, but the feeling of being watched persisted. And underneath it all, Dr. Cross's voice echoed in her memory, "You might want to invest in stronger locks." What was coming for her? And why did part of her want to throw the door wide open and welcome it in? The questions followed her home, along with the wild, dangerous scent that seemed to cling to her skin like a promise. Or a threat. In the growing darkness, Eliza couldn't tell which scared her more, the idea that someone was hunting her, or the possibility that she was becoming something that deserved to be hunted. Whatever was happening to her, she had the sinking feeling that tomorrow would bring answers she wasn't ready to hear. But ready or not, her real education was about to begin. Chapter 2. Eliza's alarm clock screamed at 6 a.m., but she'd been awake for hours. Sleep had become impossible since Dr. Cross's words echoed in her mind. The claiming begins. What did that even mean? She'd Googled it, researched territorial behavior in animals, but nothing explained the electric pull she felt whenever she thought about him. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Skip Professor Williams' psych class. Library. Second floor. Now. AC. She should have ignored it. Should have gone to her regularly scheduled classes like a normal student. Instead, Eliza found herself pulling on jeans and a sweater, her body moving without conscious thought. The library was nearly empty at this hour, dust motes dancing in the early morning light streaming through tall windows. Sebastian was waiting for her in the psychology section, his tall frame dwarfing the academic shelves around him. He looked different outside the classroom, more dangerous, less civilized. His dark hair was slightly mussed, and he wore a black sweater that clung to his broad shoulders. "You came," he said, his voice carrying satisfaction that made her stomach flutter. "I shouldn't have." Eliza kept her distance, but her traitorous body wanted to move closer. "This is inappropriate. You're my professor." "I'm many things, Eliza. Your professor is the least important of them." He stepped toward her, and she found herself backing against the shelf of books. "Did you sleep last night?" The question was casual, but his eyes were anything but. They seemed to see right through her, cataloging every detail. The dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly, the fact that she'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on something that made her feel confident. "No," she admitted. "Good." The word rumbled through his chest like a purr. "You're starting to understand." "Understand what?" Frustration leaked into her voice. "You keep talking in riddles. I don't know what you want from me." "I want everything." The simple statement hit her like a physical blow. "Your trust, your submission, your very soul. But first, I need you to accept what's happening to you." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers traced the line of her jaw. His touch sent fire racing through her veins, and she had to bite back a soft moan. "Your body recognizes me," he said softly. "Even if your mind doesn't understand why. You feel the pull, don't you? The need to be close to me?" Eliza wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Every cell in her body was screaming for his touch, for his nearness. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely beyond her control. "Yes," she whispered. "That's because we're connected, Eliza. Bonded in ways that go deeper than human understanding." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and she couldn't suppress the shiver that ran through her. "Your body knows what it needs. Stop fighting it." Before she could respond, footsteps echoed in the library. Sebastian's entire demeanor changed instantly, his body going rigid with alert tension. The soft look in his eyes vanished, replaced by something cold and dangerous. "Professor Cross?" Eliza turned to see Dr. Williams, her psychology professor, approaching with a confused expression. He was a kindly man in his 50s, with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses that made him look like everyone's favorite uncle. "Richard," Sebastian said, his voice perfectly controlled. I was just helping Miss Martinez with some research. Research? Dr. Williams' eyes moved between them, taking in their close proximity and the tension crackling in the air. Eliza, you missed my class this morning. Is everything all right? Eliza's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her mind felt sluggish, like she was trying to think through thick fog. Sebastian's hand was still touching her face, and she couldn't seem to focus on anything else. Miss Martinez is experiencing some adjustment difficulties, Sebastian said smoothly. I'm providing additional support to help her transition. Transition? Dr. Williams' frown deepened. Eliza, what's going on? This isn't like you. Eliza tried to step away from Sebastian, but his hands shifted to the back of her neck, fingers pressing lightly against her skin. The touch sent electricity shooting down her spine, making her legs weak. I'm fine. Just working on a special project. A special project that requires meeting in the library before regular classes? Dr. Williams' tone was sharp with suspicion. The project requires flexible scheduling, Sebastian replied. His fingers tightened slightly on Eliza's neck, and she felt herself relaxing into his touch despite the warning bells screaming in her head. Miss Martinez is making exceptional progress under my guidance. I see. Dr. Williams looked unconvinced. Eliza, perhaps you should come to my office later. We should discuss your academic priorities. She's quite busy with her current commitments, Sebastian said before Eliza could respond. I'm sure you understand the importance of focused study. The two men stared at each other, and Eliza felt the tension between them like a physical force. Dr. Williams was clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but something in Sebastian's posture warned him not to push further. Of course, Dr. Williams said finally. But Eliza, my door is always open if you need anything. He left with one last concerned glance over his shoulder. As soon as his footsteps faded, Sebastian's entire demeanor shifted back to intense focus on Eliza. He's suspicious, Eliza said, her voice shaky. He's irrelevant. Sebastian's hand moved to her wrist, his thumb finding her pulse point. What matters is that you're learning to trust me. I don't trust you. The words came out breathless, contradicted by the way she leaned into his touch. Your body does. His smile was predatory. And your body is wiser than your mind. He was right, and that terrified her. Every instinct she developed over 21 years of life was screaming at her to run, but a deeper, more primal part of her wanted to stay. Wanted to see what would happen if she stopped fighting the pull she felt toward him. I should go to class, she said weakly. Which class? His voice was casual, but his eyes were sharp. Organic chemistry. Professor Martinez. Cancelled. Professor Martinez had a family emergency. Sebastian's smile was satisfied. I took the liberty of checking your schedule. You're free until this afternoon. How did you? Eliza stopped, staring at him. You're manipulating my schedule. I'm ensuring you have time for what's important. His fingers trailed up her arm, leaving fire in their wake. Your education, Eliza. Your real education. This is insane. But even as she said it, she made no move to leave. I don't understand what's happening to me. You're awakening. Sebastian's voice dropped to a whisper that seemed to resonate in her bones. The woman you were meant to be is finally breaking free. He led her deeper into the library, to a secluded corner where tall shelves created a private alcove. Eliza followed without protest, her body moving of its own accord. When he stopped and turned to face her, she was trapped between his hard chest and the wall of books behind her. Tell me about the dreams, he said. Eliza's breath caught. What dreams? Don't lie to me. His hands braced against the shelf on either side of her head, caging her in. I can smell the truth on your skin. You dream about me every night. About running through forests, about hunting, about the taste of blood in your mouth. She stared at him, wide-eyed. How could he know about the dreams? They were private, personal, and far too vivid to be normal. Dreams where she ran on 4 legs instead of 2, where the world was painted in scents and sounds more intense than anything she'd ever experienced. In the dreams, she whispered, "I'm not human." "No," Sebastian agreed, his voice gentle for the first time. "You're not." The admission hung between them, changing everything. Eliza felt something crack open inside her chest, a recognition that went deeper than conscious thought. She'd always felt different, out of place in her own skin. Now, for the first time, someone was telling her why. "What am I?" she asked. "You're mine," Sebastian said simply. "That's all you need to know for now." His hand cupped her face, and she felt herself melting into the touch. This was madness. He was her professor, and she was letting him manipulate her schedule, isolate her from other students, and fill her mind with impossible ideas. But when he looked at her like that, with such intense possession, she forgot all her reasonable objections. "I should be afraid of you," she breathed. "You should," he agreed. "But you're not, are you?" She shook her head, unable to form words. Fear was the last thing she felt when he was close. Instead, there was warmth, safety, and a bone-deep certainty that this was where she belonged. "That's because you recognize what I am," Sebastian continued. "Just as I recognized you the moment you walked into my classroom. Your pack, Eliza. Your family. You're mine." The possessive way he said the last word sent heat flooding through her body. She should have been offended by his claim, but instead she felt a fierce satisfaction. The feeling was so strong it scared her. "This is happening too fast," she said, trying to inject some sanity into the situation. "Time is a human construct," Sebastian replied. "What we have transcends human limitations." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Tonight, you'll come to my office. We'll continue your education there, where we won't be interrupted." "I have plans tonight," Eliza said automatically, though she couldn't remember what those plans were. "Cancel them." It wasn't a request. "What we're doing is more important than anything else in your life." He was right, and that realization sent a chill down her spine. In the space of a few days, Sebastian Crow had become the center of her world. She thought about him constantly, craved his attention, and felt lost when he wasn't near. It wasn't healthy, but she couldn't seem to stop herself. "What if someone sees us?" she asked. "Let them." His smile was sharp and dangerous. "I want everyone to know you're under my protection." The word protection sent another shiver through her. Protection from what? But before she could ask, Sebastian stepped back, creating distance between them. The loss of his nearness felt like a physical wound. "Go home," he said. "Rest. Eat something with protein. You'll need your strength for tonight." Eliza nodded, unable to argue. She gathered her things and left the library in a daze, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. It wasn't until she was halfway to her dorm that she realized she'd missed 3 classes and hadn't even cared. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate. "Where are you? Dr. Williams was looking for you." Eliza stared at the message, guilt crawling up her throat. She'd been the perfect student her entire life, never missing classes, never letting anything interfere with her education. Now she was skipping classes to meet secretly with a professor who spoke about claiming her like she was property. She should have been horrified. Instead, she felt a dark thrill at the memory of his possessive words. Tonight, she would go to his office, and he would continue whatever this was between them. The thought should have terrified her, but all she felt was anticipation. As she climbed the stairs to her dorm room, Eliza caught a glimpse of the woman from yesterday, the one who'd been watching the biology building. She was sitting in a car across the street, her sharp eyes trained on the dormitory entrance. Their gazes met through the window, and Eliza felt that same chill of recognition. Someone was watching her. Someone other than Sebastian. Eliza hurried into her building, her heart pounding. She was caught between 2 forces she didn't understand, Sebastian's dark possession and this stranger's cold surveillance. Both felt dangerous, but in completely different ways. Once safely in her room, Eliza collapsed on her bed and stared at the ceiling. Everything in her life was changing at light speed, and she felt like she was losing control. The worst part was that she didn't want to stop it. Whatever Sebastian was doing to her, however he was changing her, she wanted more. That night, she would go to his office. She would let him continue his dark education, and she would try not to think about the consequences. Because for the first time in her life, Eliza Fitzgerald felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Even if that place might destroy her. Chapter 3. Eliza sat cross-legged on her dorm room floor at 3 in the morning, staring at her hands. They looked normal enough in the dim light from her desk lamp, but she could feel something moving beneath the skin. A restlessness that made her bones ache and her muscles twitch. Her roommate Sarah had gone home for the weekend, leaving Eliza alone with the changes she couldn't understand. The dreams had gotten worse. Last night she'd dreamed of running through dark woods, her feet, silent on the forest floor. She'd woken with dirt under her fingernails and scratches on her arms that were already healing. "This isn't happening," she whispered, but her reflection in the mirror across the room showed eyes that seemed to glow amber in the darkness. The panic started small, just a flutter in her chest. But it grew quickly, spreading through her body like wildfire. Her skin felt too tight, like it belonged to someone else. Her teeth ached, and when she ran her tongue over them, they felt sharper than before. Eliza stumbled to her feet, gasping for air that wouldn't come. The walls of her small dorm room seemed to be closing in. She needed space, needed to run, needed to. Pain exploded through her body. She doubled over, a scream tearing from her throat as her bones began to shift. Her fingers lengthened, nails extending into claws that dug furrows in the wooden floor. The rational part of her mind gibbered in terror, but something deeper recognized what was happening and embraced it. "No, no, no," she panted, but her voice came out rough and inhuman. Her spine arched, vertebrae popping and realigning. Muscles she'd never known she had rippled beneath her skin. The pain was incredible, but underneath it was something else, a wild joy that terrified her more than the physical agony. Eliza's vision sharpened until she could see every dust mote in the air. Scents flooded her nose, the industrial soap they used to clean the dorms, Sarah's vanilla perfume lingering on her pillow, and underneath it all, something wild and earthy that called to her soul. A knock at the door made her freeze. "Eliza." Sebastian's voice was calm, controlled. "Open the door." She couldn't speak. Her jaw had elongated, and when she tried to form words, only a low growl emerged. How was he here? How did he know? The door opened anyway. Sebastian stepped inside like he owned the space, his dark eyes taking in her half-transformed state with satisfaction rather than shock. "Finally," he said, and his voice held a rumble that spoke to the beast stirring in her chest. Eliza tried to back away, but her legs wouldn't obey. She was caught between human and something else, her body a battlefield she was losing. When she looked at Sebastian, her new senses catalogued everything about him, the predatory grace in his movements, the scent of pine and leather that clung to his skin, the way his eyes reflected the light like an animal's. "Stay back," she managed to snarl, but it came out as more growl than words. Sebastian smiled, showing teeth that were just a little too sharp. "I don't think so." He crossed the room in 2 quick strides and pinned her against the wall. His hands were gentle but unbreakable, holding her wrists while she thrashed against him. Eliza felt her new fangs extend fully, and she snapped at him with vicious intent. "Good," Sebastian murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "You're ready to know what you are. What you're mine to claim." "I'm not yours," Eliza snarled, but her body betrayed her words. Even in this state, even terrified and in pain, she felt drawn to him. "Aren't you?" His hands slid down to her shoulders, thumbs pressing against pressure points that made her knees weak. "Your body knows better. It's been calling to me for weeks." The partial transformation was agony. She was stuck between human and wolf, her body unable to complete the change on its own. Sebastian seemed to understand her struggle. His hands moved over her with practiced certainty, finding points of tension and pain. "Let me help," he said, and there was something almost tender in his voice. Help? Eliza laughed, but it came out as a bark. You did this to me. I awakened what was already there. Sebastian's fingers found the base of her skull, pressing firmly. You were never fully human, Eliza. Just sleeping. The pressure of his touch sent fire racing down her spine. Eliza arched against him, crying out as her bones shifted again. This time, instead of fighting the change, she felt herself surrendering to it. That's it, Sebastian encouraged. Stop fighting yourself. His hands guided her through the transformation with an intimacy that should have been terrifying. He knew exactly where to touch, how much pressure to apply, when to support her weight as her body reconfigured itself. It was like he'd done this before, many times. The change accelerated. Eliza's human thoughts grew dim as instinct took over. Her vision shifted, the world becoming a landscape of scents and sounds too complex for human understanding. She could smell Sebastian's arousal, sharp and male, and her own response to it. The combination was intoxicating. When the transformation completed, Eliza found herself on 4 legs, covered in thick silver-gray fur. She was smaller than she'd expected, more delicate, but she could feel the strength coiled in her new muscles. Her reflection in the mirror showed a wolf with amber eyes that held human intelligence. Sebastian crouched in front of her, no longer bothering to hide his own inhuman nature. His eyes glowed gold, and when he smiled, his canines were fully extended. Beautiful, he said, reaching out to touch her muzzle. Even more perfect than I imagined. Eliza should have been afraid. Should have been horrified by what she'd become. Instead, she felt complete for the first time in her life. This body fit her in ways her human form never had. When Sebastian's scent filled her nose, she felt a recognition so deep it went beyond thought. Pack. Mate. Home. The words weren't human concepts, but they made perfect sense to her wolf mind. Sebastian's transformation was faster than hers had been, controlled and practiced. Within moments, a massive black wolf sat before her, easily twice her size. His fur was midnight dark except for silver markings around his eyes and muzzle that spoke of age and power. When he approached her, Eliza didn't retreat. Some instinct older than civilization told her he was dominant, that submission was not just expected but craved. She lowered her head, exposing her throat in a gesture of trust that terrified and thrilled her human consciousness. The black wolf's approval rumbled through his chest. He touched his muzzle to hers, scent marking her, claiming her in ways that human words couldn't express. Eliza felt herself melting into the contact, her wolf's soul singing with recognition. Mine, his scent seemed to say. Finally mine. They stayed like that for long minutes, relearning each other through senses humans had forgotten they possessed. Eliza discovered that Sebastian's wolf was ancient, powerful, with an authority that made every instinct in her body bow in recognition. He was alpha, and she was his. The thought should have made her rebel, but instead it filled her with fierce pride. To be chosen by such a creature, claimed by him, it was an honor beyond human understanding. When they transformed back, the change was easier. Eliza's body seemed to remember how it worked now, bones and muscles sliding back into human configuration with only mild discomfort. She found herself naked and kneeling on her dorm room floor, Sebastian's hand still touching her face. Now you know, he said quietly. What you are. What we are. Eliza stared at him, her mind reeling. Werewolf. Such a crude human word. Sebastian helped her to her feet, seemingly unconcerned by their mutual nudity. We are shifters. Wolves who can take human form when it suits us. How long have you known? She asked. About me? Since the moment you walked into my classroom. Sebastian's smile was predatory. Your scent called to me. Your pack, Eliza. My pack. And more than that. He paused, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her breath catch. You're my mate. The word hit her like a physical blow. Mate. Not girlfriend, not lover. Something deeper, more permanent. More primal. I don't understand, Eliza whispered. You will. Sebastian reached for her clothes, helping her dress with gentle efficiency. This is just the beginning of your education. As Eliza pulled on her sweater, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. There, on her desk, partially hidden by textbooks, was a small electronic device she'd never seen before. A bug. Someone had been listening. Sebastian followed her gaze and his expression darkened. He moved to the device with inhuman speed, plucking it from its hiding place. Instead of destroying it, he held it up to his mouth. Agent Clark, he said conversationally. I hope you enjoyed the show. Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. Someone was listening. Not just listening. Watching. Sebastian crushed the device in his palm, circuits sparking between his fingers. The government has been tracking our kind for decades. They know what we are. The woman, Eliza breathed, remembering the Asian woman who'd been watching her. She's some kind of agent? FBI Supernatural Division. They've been monitoring you since your changes started. Sebastian's voice was calm, but Eliza could smell the rage coming off him in waves. Don't worry. My pack has been aware of her surveillance. We've been feeding her false information for weeks. He moved to the window, looking out at the parking lot below. Eliza joined him, following his gaze to a nondescript sedan parked under a streetlight. She could see a figure inside, but even with her enhanced vision, she couldn't make out details. She saw everything, Eliza said, panic rising in her throat. She saw what we wanted her to see. Sebastian's arm slid around her waist, pulling her against his side. The equipment we allowed her to place here has been compromised from the beginning. All she recorded tonight was static and background noise. How? We have our ways. Sebastian's smile was sharp. Technology is useful, but it's no match for supernatural cunning. Agent Clark thinks her surveillance is undetected. She has no idea we've been manipulating her from the start. Eliza leaned into his warmth, trying to process everything that had happened. An hour ago, she'd been human. Now she was something else entirely, claimed by a creature she barely understood, hunted by government agents. What happens now? She asked. Now you learn what it means to be Pac. Sebastian's hand stroked her hair, soothing despite the dangerous undertones in his voice. You learn to use your new abilities. You learn to hunt, to fight, to protect what's ours. And if I don't want to? Sebastian's hands stilled in her hair. When he looked down at her, his eyes held golden fire. You felt what I felt in there, he said quietly. When we were wolves together. You recognized me, just as I recognized you. This isn't a choice, Eliza. It's destiny. He was right, and that terrified her. In wolf form, with his scent filling her nose and his presence dominating her senses, she'd felt complete. Like she'd been searching for him her entire life without knowing it. The dreams, she said suddenly. You were there. In my dreams, before any of this started. I called to you. Sebastian's admission was matter-of-fact. Through the pack bond. Your wolf was responding even when your human mind didn't understand what was happening. You manipulated me. I awakened you. His correction was gentle but firm. There's a difference. Eliza wanted to argue, but she couldn't find the words. Everything he was saying felt true on a level deeper than rational thought. Her body recognized him, craved his touch, submitted to his dominance in ways that her feminist ideals should have rejected. But she wasn't entirely human anymore. And maybe she never had been. Agent Clark is leaving, Sebastian observed, nodding toward the parking lot. Eliza looked out to see the sedan pulling away from the curb. Even from this distance, she could sense the woman's frustration. Whatever she'd hoped to record tonight, she'd failed. She'll be back, Sebastian said. But not tonight. Tonight, you're safe. Safe. The word should have been comforting, but Eliza felt anything but secure. Her world had been turned upside down, her body transformed, her future uncertain. The only constant was Sebastian, and she wasn't sure if that was salvation or damnation. "Stay with me," she said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Sebastian's smile was triumphant. "Always," he promised. "From now on, you're never alone." He pulled her away from the window, back toward her narrow dorm bed. When he settled beside her, fully clothed but radiating heat like a furnace, Eliza felt herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. "Sleep," Sebastian murmured against her hair. "Tomorrow, your real life begins." Eliza closed her eyes, surrounded by his scent and warmth. Outside, the night was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic. But she could hear more now, the heartbeats of students in neighboring rooms, the scratch of mice in the walls, the whisper of wind through trees she couldn't see. Her senses were sharper, her body stronger, her connection to the natural world deeper than she'd ever imagined possible. She was no longer human, no longer alone, no longer the ordinary girl who'd walked into Dr. Cross's biology class just days ago. She was something new. Something dangerous. Something his. As sleep finally claimed her, Eliza's last conscious thought was of amber eyes and the feeling of running through moonlit forests. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new revelations, new dangers. But tonight, for the first time since her changes began, she felt like she knew exactly where she belonged. In Sebastian's arms, claimed and protected by a power older than civilization itself. The transformation was complete. There was no going back now. Chapter 4. Eliza woke to the sound of Sebastian moving around her dorm room. The morning light streaming through her window felt harsh against her newly sensitive eyes, and she squinted as she sat up in bed. Every muscle in her body ached from the transformation, but underneath the soreness was a strange sense of vitality she'd never experienced before. "Good morning," Sebastian said, not turning from where he stood at her desk, typing on a laptop she didn't recognize. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a truck." Eliza stretched, wincing as her spine popped. "But also, different. Stronger. That's the wolf settling into your system." Sebastian finally looked at her, his dark eyes assessing. "The first shift is always the hardest. It gets easier." Eliza noticed he was fully dressed in the same clothes from last night, as if he hadn't slept at all. There was an intensity about him this morning that made her nervous, a coiled energy that reminded her of a predator preparing to strike. "What are you doing?" she asked, nodding toward the laptop. "Research." Sebastian's smile was sharp. "There are things about your heritage you need to know. Things I've been waiting for the right moment to share." The word heritage sent a chill down Eliza's spine. She thought about her parents, killed in a car accident when she was 15. They'd been ordinary people. Her father worked in insurance, her mother taught elementary school. What could they possibly have to do with werewolves? "My parents were human," she said carefully. "Were they?" Sebastian closed the laptop with a soft click. "Come here, Eliza. It's time you learned the truth." Something in his tone made her want to refuse, but her body moved without conscious thought. The bond she'd felt last night seemed stronger now, pulling her toward him like gravity. When she stood before him, Sebastian cupped her face in his hands. "What I'm about to show you will hurt," he said gently. "But you need to see it. You need to understand what you really are, and why you belong to me." Before Eliza could ask what he meant, Sebastian turned the laptop screen toward her. A video player was open, showing what looked like surveillance footage. The timestamp read 6 years ago, just a few months before her parents died. "Watch," Sebastian commanded. The footage showed a residential street Eliza recognized with a jolt of pain. Her childhood home. In the video, a black sedan was parked across the street from the house. As she watched, the front door opened and her parents emerged. Eliza's breath caught. There they were, her mother with her soft brown hair and gentle smile, her father tall and protective. They looked exactly as she remembered them, and seeing them alive again, even in a recording, made her chest tight with grief. "They look human, don't they?" Sebastian's voice was conversational, but there was something cold underneath. Your adoptive parents did an excellent job maintaining that illusion. Adoptive? Eliza's voice came out as a whisper. What are you talking about? Those are my parents. Those are the people who raised you, Sebastian corrected. But they weren't your biological parents. Look closer, Eliza. Watch what happens next. In the video, her parents, the people she'd thought were her parents, walked toward their car. As they moved, Eliza noticed something she'd never seen before. Their movements were too fluid, too graceful. And when her father turned his head to scan the street, his eyes reflected the light like an animal's. They were wolves, Sebastian said softly. Guardians assigned to protect you until you came of age. They did their job well, maybe too well. They actually cared about you. Eliza stared at the screen in shock. That's impossible. They were just normal. They went to work, they helped me with homework, they died to keep you safe. Sebastian's finger hovered over the trackpad. Do you want to see how? Eliza wanted to say no, wanted to turn away, but something compelled her to nod. Sebastian clicked play. The footage continued. Her parents reached their car, but before they could get in, black SUVs screeched around the corner from both directions. Armed figures in tactical gear poured out, surrounding the couple. FBI Supernatural Task Force, Sebastian narrated. They'd been tracking your guardians for months. In the video, her father shifted into a massive brown wolf in the space of a heartbeat. Her mother followed, transforming into a smaller wolf with reddish fur. They fought with desperate fury, taking down several agents before the gunfire started. Eliza watched in horror as silver bullets tore through the wolves. Her father fell first, a howl of pain and rage cut short by blood. Her mother lasted only seconds longer before collapsing beside him. No, Eliza whispered, tears streaming down her face. No, that's not how they died. It was a car accident. There was ice on the road. A cover story. Sebastian's arms slid around her waist as she swayed on her feet. The FBI cleaned up the scene, disposed of the bodies, and created a believable accident. They do it all the time. Eliza felt like she was drowning. Everything she'd believed about her life, her family, her identity was crumbling around her. Her parents hadn't been human. They'd died protecting her from government agents. And she'd never known any of it. Why? She choked out. Why did they have to die? Because they were weak. Sebastian's voice held no sympathy. They should have brought you to me when your powers first manifested. Instead, they tried to keep you hidden, to let you live a human life. Their softness got them killed. The casual cruelty in his words hit Eliza like a slap. She pulled away from him, anger flaring through her grief. They loved me, she snapped. They died protecting me, and you call them weak? Love is weakness when it clouds judgment. Sebastian's eyes glittered dangerously. If they'd been stronger, smarter, they would have recognized what you are and brought you to your true family. To me. What I am. Eliza wiped her eyes with shaking hands. You keep saying that like it means something special. Sebastian's smile was triumphant. It means everything. You're not just any wolf, Eliza. You're the last pure alpha female of the Martinez bloodline. Your real parents were the most powerful pack leaders on the West Coast before the FBI hunted them down. The words hit her like physical blows. Alpha. Pure bloodline. The implications were staggering. That's impossible, Eliza said weakly. I'm nobody special. I'm just. You're mine. Sebastian moved closer, backing her against the wall. Do you understand what that means? Alpha females are born maybe once in a generation. They're the only ones who can bear true alpha offspring, the only ones who can strengthen a bloodline instead of diluting it. His hands braced on either side of her head, trapping her. Eliza could smell his arousal, sharp and male, mixed with something darker. Obsession. I've been tracking your family for 15 years, Sebastian continued. Watching, waiting, eliminating obstacles. There were 3 other potential mates for you, young alphas from rival packs who might have tried to claim you. They're all dead now. Eliza stared at him in horror. You killed them? I eliminated the competition. Sebastian's voice was matter-of-fact. You were always meant to be mine, Eliza. I wasn't going to let some inferior male steal what belongs to me. I don't belong to anyone. Eliza tried to push past him, but he didn't budge. The casual display of strength terrified her. Don't you? Sebastian's thumb traced her lower lip. Tell me you don't feel the bond between us. Tell me your body doesn't crave my touch. Eliza wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. Even now, terrified and angry, she felt drawn to him. Her body responded to his nearness despite her mind's protests. That's not natural, she said desperately. This feeling, it's not real. Oh, it's very real. Sebastian's smile was predatory. Though you're right that it's not entirely natural. I may have encouraged the bond along. What do you mean? Instead of answering, Sebastian pulled a small vial from his pocket. It contained a dark red liquid that seemed to shimmer in the light. Alpha blood, he said conversationally. Very powerful. A few drops in your coffee each morning, a touch in your food. Not enough to hurt you, just enough to create a connection. Eliza felt sick. You've been drugging me? I've been preparing you. Sebastian pocketed the vial. The bond between us is real, Eliza, but it needed a catalyst. My blood in your system created a supernatural connection that grows stronger every day. You're insane. Eliza tried again to push past him, but this time pain lanced through her chest. Sharp, brutal agony that drove her to her knees. Careful, Sebastian said mildly, not making any move to help her. The bond doesn't like it when you try to run from me. The farther you go, the worse it gets. Eliza gasped, clutching her chest. The pain was incredible, like someone was ripping her heart out. When she stopped trying to move away from Sebastian, it faded to a dull ache. What did you do to me? She panted. I made sure you could never leave. Sebastian crouched beside her, his hands stroking her hair. The blood bond is permanent, Eliza. Your body will always need mine close. Try to run, and the pain will eventually kill you. The casual way he said it, like he was discussing the weather, made Eliza's blood run cold. She was trapped. Completely and utterly trapped by a man who'd orchestrated her entire life. The pack, she said suddenly. You said I'd meet your pack. Maybe they. My pack follows my orders, Sebastian interrupted. Every wolf in this territory belongs to me. They know what you are, what you mean to our future, and they'll do whatever I tell them to keep you safe and compliant. He stood, pulling her to her feet with gentle strength that reminded her how easily he could hurt her if he wanted to. This isn't a democracy, Eliza. It's a kingdom, and you're going to be my queen whether you want to or not. Eliza stared at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the charming professor or the mysterious supernatural lover, but a predator who'd been stalking her for years. Who'd murdered her guardian's colleagues, manipulated her life, and now held her prisoner through supernatural means. You're a monster, she whispered. I'm a survivor. Sebastian's expression didn't change. And more importantly, I'm your mate. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. He moved back to the laptop, pulling up more files. Eliza caught glimpses of documents, photographs, surveillance reports. Her entire life laid out like a case study. I know everything about you, Sebastian said without looking up. Every friend you've ever had, every teacher who influenced you, every boy you kissed in high school. I've been watching you since you were 15 years old, waiting for you to mature. The timeline made Eliza's skin crawl. He'd been watching her since she was a teenager. Planning this. You're sick, she said. I'm thorough. Sebastian finally looked at her again. Do you want to see the rest? The reports on your college roommates, your professors, the coffee shop where you work, I have files on everyone in your life." Eliza felt trapped, suffocated by the scope of his obsession. He'd turned her entire existence into a game, with her as the unwitting prize. "Why?" she asked desperately. "Why go to all this trouble? There have to be other alpha females somewhere. Not like you." Sebastian's eyes burned with fanatic intensity. "Your bloodline is the purest I've ever found. Your children will be more powerful than any born in the last century. You're not just any alpha female, Eliza. You're the key to rebuilding our species." The way he talked about her, like she was a breeding animal, made Eliza feel sick. But underneath the revulsion was fear. Because she could see the truth in his eyes, he would never let her go. Never. "What if I refuse?" she asked quietly. "What if I never give you what you want?" Sebastian's smile was sharp as a blade. "Then you'll spend eternity trying. The blood bond ensures you'll never be able to stay away from me long enough to form attachments elsewhere. And eventually, your wolf will override your human objections. Nature always wins, Eliza." He was right, and they both knew it. Already, despite everything he'd revealed, her body craved his closeness. The bond he'd forced on her was like a drug, creating artificial need that felt completely real. "You have a choice," Sebastian continued. "Accept what you are, embrace your role as my mate and the future mother of my children. Or fight it and suffer. But either way, you're mine." Eliza closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her new reality settling over her like a shroud. Her parents were dead, killed by government agents. Her guardians had died trying to protect her. She was the last of a bloodline she'd never known existed, bonded to a man who'd orchestrated her entire life. And somewhere out there, Agent Clark was still watching, still hunting, still trying to figure out what was happening. Eliza was caught between a possessive alpha who would never let her go and government agents who saw her as a threat to be eliminated. She was trapped in every possible way. When she opened her eyes, Sebastian was watching her with satisfaction. He could see her acceptance, her surrender to the inevitable. "Good girl," he murmured, pulling her into his arms. "Now we can begin your real education." As Eliza let herself be held by the man who destroyed her life to remake it in his image, she wondered if there was any part of herself left that truly belonged to her. Or if, like everything else, even her thoughts would eventually become his property. The blood bond pulsed between them, a chain she could never break. She was his queen now, whether she wanted to be or not. Chapter 5. Eliza stared at the ceiling of her dorm room for hours after Sebastian left, his words echoing in her mind like a curse. "You're mine." The blood bond pulsed beneath her skin, a constant reminder of the supernatural chain he'd forged between them. Every time she tried to imagine a life without him, pain lanced through her chest. But she had to try something. She couldn't just accept this. Dr. Elizabeth Edward had been Eliza's psychology professor freshman year, and more importantly, she'd become something of a mentor. Dr. Edward was the one who'd encouraged Eliza to pursue advanced courses, who'd written recommendation letters, who'd always had an open door when Eliza needed to talk. If anyone could help her make sense of what was happening, it would be her. Eliza waited until late afternoon, when most students would be in classes or at dinner. The psychology building was quiet, and Dr. Edward's office light was on. Eliza knocked softly. "Come in," came the familiar voice. Dr. Edward looked up from her desk with a warm smile that faltered slightly when she saw Eliza's face. She was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked brown hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She'd always reminded Eliza of the mother she'd lost, warm, intelligent, trustworthy. "Eliza, dear, you look terrible. Are you feeling all right?" Eliza closed the door behind her and took a seat across from Dr. Edward's desk. Where to even begin? How could she explain that her life had been a lie, that she wasn't human, that she was trapped by a supernatural bond to a man who'd been manipulating her for years? "Dr. Edward, I need help," Eliza said quietly. "Something's happening to me, and I don't know who else to turn to." Dr. Edward leaned forward, her expression concerned. "Of course. What's going on?" Eliza took a shaky breath. It's about Dr. Cross. Sebastian Crow from the biology department. I think he's been drugging me. Manipulating me somehow. She watched Dr. Edward face carefully, looking for shock or alarm. Instead, she saw something that made her blood run cold, a flicker of what looked like annoyance. Drugging you? Dr. Edward asked carefully. That's a very serious accusation, Eliza. What makes you think that? He admitted it, Eliza said desperately. He showed me surveillance footage of my parents' deaths, told me he's been tracking me for years. He's done something to create this connection between us that makes it physically painful to be away from him. Dr. Edward was quiet for a long moment, her fingers steepled in front of her. When she spoke, her voice was gentler than Eliza expected. Eliza, have you been sleeping? Eating regularly? You've been under a lot of stress lately with your advanced coursework. This isn't about stress. Eliza's voice rose, frustration bleeding through. Dr. Edward, please. He's dangerous. He's not what he seems. None of this is what it seems. What do you mean by that? Eliza hesitated. How could she explain about werewolves without sounding completely insane? But Dr. Edward was a psychologist. She dealt with delusions and mental breaks all the time. Surely she would recognize that Eliza was lucid, coherent, despite the impossible nature of what she was saying. There are things about human biology that aren't in the textbooks, Eliza said carefully. Genetic variations that most people don't know about. Dr. Cross is involved in research that's classified. Dr. Edward nodded slowly. I see. And you believe you're part of this research? I know I am. Eliza leaned forward desperately. Dr. Edward, I'm telling you the truth. Dr. Cross has been manipulating my life for years. He's dangerous, and I need help getting away from him. For a moment, Dr. Edward looked genuinely conflicted. Then she reached for her phone. Let me make a call, she said. Someone who might be able to help. Relief flooded through Eliza. Finally, someone was taking her seriously. She watched as Dr. Edward scrolled through her contacts and placed the call. Sebastian? Yes, she's here. No, she seems quite agitated. Yes, I understand. Of course. The words hit Eliza like ice water. She stared at Dr. Edward in growing horror as the older woman hung up the phone. He'll be here in 10 minutes, Dr. Edward said calmly. You called him? Eliza's voice came out as a whisper. You called Sebastian? Dr. Edward removed her glasses and cleaned them methodically. Eliza, I think you're having some kind of breakdown. The stress of your advanced studies, combined with whatever relationship you've developed with Dr. Cross, seems to have triggered some kind of psychotic episode. I'm not having a breakdown. Eliza shot to her feet, panic flooding her system. Everything I told you is true. Sit down, Eliza. Dr. Edward's voice carried a note of authority that made Eliza's legs weak. You're not well. Eliza remained standing, her mind racing. Dr. Edward had called Sebastian immediately. She'd shown no surprise at Eliza's accusations, no shock at the implications. Almost like she'd been expecting this conversation. How long? Eliza asked quietly. How long what? How long have you been reporting to him? Dr. Edward sighed, suddenly looking older. Since your freshman year. He was very concerned about your psychological adjustment to university life. The admission hit Eliza like a physical blow. Dr. Edward, the one person she'd trusted, the mentor who'd guided her academic career, had been working for Sebastian all along. He pays you, Eliza said, the pieces clicking together. He pays me very well to keep you stable, Dr. Edward confirmed without a trace of remorse. To monitor your mental state and report any concerning developments. Your isolation from your high school friends, your difficulty forming close relationships here, all normal responses to the psychological conditioning you've been undergoing. Conditioning? Eliza felt sick. Sebastian has very specific requirements for your development. Social isolation makes you more dependent on him. Academic success builds your confidence while keeping you focused on individual achievement rather than group bonding. Even your housing assignment was carefully selected. Eliza thought about her dorm room, how she'd ended up with a roommate who was never around, how she'd struggled to make friends despite her academic success. She'd attributed it to shyness, to being focused on her studies. But it had all been planned. My roommate, she said slowly. Sarah's course schedule is arranged to minimize your contact with her. Her frequent trips home are encouraged and funded. Sebastian wants you comfortable with solitude. Every aspect of her life had been manipulated. Every choice she thought she'd made had been guided by invisible hands. Eliza felt like she was drowning. The other professors? My grades? Your academic performance is genuine, Dr. Edward said. Sebastian wanted you to excel, to build confidence in your intellectual abilities. But yes, certain professors have been influenced to ensure you received the opportunities you needed. You're all working for him. Eliza's voice was flat with shock. Not all. Just those in key positions. Sebastian is very wealthy, Eliza, and very persuasive. He's also incredibly patient. This plan has been 15 years in the making. Eliza heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Heavy, measured steps that made her pulse quicken with recognition. Sebastian was coming. I have to go, Eliza said, moving toward the door. You can't leave, dear. Dr. Edward's voice was gentle but firm. Sebastian specifically asked me to keep you here until he arrives. Eliza tried the door handle. It was locked. You locked me in? Panic flooded her system. Dr. Edward, please. You don't understand what he is. I understand perfectly. Dr. Edward stood, moving to block Eliza's path to the window. Sebastian explained your condition to me years ago. The genetic anomalies, the psychological instability that comes with your particular heritage. You need specialized care, Eliza. You need him. He's lying to you. Eliza backed against the wall, trapped. Whatever he told you about me, it's not the whole truth. Isn't it? Dr. Edward tilted her head. You're telling me you haven't been experiencing unusual sensory changes? Enhanced hearing, smell? Vivid dreams about running through forests? Unexplained aggression and mood swings? Eliza stared at her. How do you know about the dreams? Because Sebastian told me what to watch for. The signs of your awakening. I've been documenting everything for years, your sleep patterns, your dietary changes, your social interactions. All to help him understand how to best support you through this transition. The footsteps stopped outside the door. A soft knock made Eliza's heart hammer against her ribs. Dr. Edward? Sebastian's voice was muffled through the wood. Is she secure? Yes, come in. The door opened, and Sebastian stepped inside. He looked calm, concerned even, but Eliza could see the predatory satisfaction in his eyes. He'd known she would come here. Had probably been counting on it. Eliza, he said gently. Dr. Edward tells me you're having some difficulties. You bastard. Eliza's voice shook with rage. You've been manipulating everything. Everyone. I've been protecting you. Sebastian closed the door behind him and leaned against it, effectively blocking her only exit. And preparing you for what you are. By isolating me? By making everyone in my life report to you? By ensuring you had the support structure you needed. Sebastian's voice was maddeningly reasonable. Do you think your transformation would have been easier if you'd been surrounded by human friends who couldn't understand what was happening to you? If professors who didn't know your true nature had been monitoring your academic performance? Eliza wanted to argue, but part of what he was saying made horrible sense. If she'd been living a normal college life when the changes started, surrounded by humans who would have been terrified by what she was becoming, it would have been catastrophic. You had no right, she said weakly. I had every right. Sebastian moved closer, and despite everything, Eliza felt her body responding to his presence. The blood bond pulsed between them, easing the constant ache in her chest. "You're my mate, Eliza. It's my job to provide for you, to protect you, to ensure your well-being. By controlling every aspect of my life? By giving you what you need." Sebastian was close enough to touch now, his scent filling her nose and making her thoughts fuzzy. "Tell me, have you ever been happier than you are when you're with me? Ever felt more complete?" Eliza wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. The truth was that despite her fear and anger, she felt most herself when Sebastian was near. The bond he'd created made his presence addictive. "That's not real," she whispered. "It's the blood bond. You forced this connection." "The bond amplifies what was already there," Sebastian corrected. "Your wolf recognized me from the moment we met. I simply made sure you couldn't ignore the call." Dr. Edward cleared her throat softly. "Perhaps I should leave you two to discuss this privately." "No," Sebastian said without taking his eyes off Eliza. "I want you to see this. It's important for Eliza's ongoing treatment." Treatment? Like she was sick, broken, something to be fixed. "Sebastian," Eliza said desperately, "please. Just let me go. I won't tell anyone about what you are, what I am. I'll disappear, start over somewhere else." Sebastian's expression grew cold. "That's not possible." "Why not?" Instead of answering, Sebastian pulled out his phone and showed her a video. The image was grainy, clearly surveillance footage, but Eliza could make out a woman in what looked like a padded cell. The woman was thin to the point of emaciation, her hair wild and matted. She was pacing frantically, occasionally throwing herself against the walls with enough force to leave bloody smears. "This is Rebecca Winters," Sebastian said quietly. "Alpha female from the Montana Territory. She refused her designated mate 5 years ago." Eliza watched in horror as the woman in the video suddenly collapsed, convulsing violently. When the seizure passed, she lay still for only a moment before resuming her frantic pacing. The rejection broke something in her mind, Sebastian continued. Without the stabilizing influence of her mate bond, her wolf and human halves are at war. She hasn't spoken a coherent word in 3 years. "That's not what would happen to me," Eliza said, but her voice lacked conviction. Sebastian swiped to another video. This one showed a man who might have been handsome once, but was now scarred and twisted. He was chained to a wall, snarling and snapping at anyone who came near. "Harrison Clark," Sebastian said. "Yes, related to your FBI friend. He was an alpha who tried to live without a mate. The isolation drove him feral. He killed 6 people before his own pack had to put him down." Eliza felt sick. "You're lying. These could be anyone." "Dr. Edward has the psychological profiles," Sebastian said. "Don't you, Elizabeth?" Dr. Edward nodded, pulling a thick folder from her desk drawer. "I've studied dozens of cases over the years. Alpha wolves who resist the mating bond suffer severe psychological deterioration. The stronger the bloodline, the more catastrophic the breakdown." She opened the folder, revealing photographs and medical records. Eliza caught glimpses of brain scans showing severe abnormalities, psychiatric evaluations documenting complete psychological collapse. "Your bloodline is among the strongest on record," Dr. Edward continued. "Without Sebastian's influence, without the mate bond to stabilize your dual nature, you would likely survive less than a year before complete mental breakdown." "That's impossible," Eliza whispered, but the evidence was right there in front of her. "It's biology," Sebastian said softly. "Alpha wolves aren't meant to exist alone. We're pack creatures, and the strongest of us need the deepest bonds to maintain our sanity. The blood bond isn't just about control, Eliza. It's about survival." He moved closer, his hands framing her face with surprising gentleness. "You can hate me," he whispered against her throat, his breath warm on her skin. "You can fight this, resent every choice I've made. But you can't survive without me." Eliza felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Every revelation made her situation more hopeless. She wasn't just trapped by supernatural bonds and manipulated circumstances, she was trapped by her own biology. The other werewolves, she said desperately. Your pack. Surely some of them. My pack follows my orders, Sebastian interrupted. And even if they didn't, none of them are strong enough to provide what you need. You're an alpha female, Eliza. You need an alpha male. You need me. The certainty in his voice broke something inside her. Eliza sagged against the wall, feeling the weight of her new reality crushing down on her. There was no escape. No rescue. No choice. What do you want from me? She asked quietly. Acceptance, Sebastian said simply. Stop fighting what you are. Stop fighting us. Let me give you the life you were meant to have. And if I do? Then you'll be cherished, protected, loved in ways no human woman could ever understand. Sebastian's hands slid down to her shoulders. You'll be the queen of the most powerful pack on the West Coast. You'll bear children who will reshape our species. You'll have everything you could ever want. Except freedom. Freedom is an illusion, Dr. Edward interjected. Humans think they're free, but they're slaves to their biology, their emotions, their social conditioning. At least with Sebastian, you'll know exactly where you stand. Eliza looked between them, the man who'd orchestrated her entire life and the woman who'd helped him do it. Both watching her with expectant expressions, waiting for her surrender. The blood bond pulsed in her chest, reminding her that she was already bound to Sebastian in ways that transcended choice. The evidence of what happened to resistant alphas was overwhelming. Her own biology was a trap she could never escape. I need time, Eliza said finally. Of course, Sebastian agreed. But not too much time. The longer you fight this, the more it will hurt. And Eliza? She looked up at him. Don't try to run again. The bond is stronger now, and the pain will be worse. Besides, his smile was sharp. Where would you go? Everyone in your life answers to me. It was true, and they all knew it. Eliza was more alone than she'd ever imagined possible, surrounded by people who were loyal to the man who'd claimed her. As Sebastian and Dr. Edward discussed her treatment plan, like she wasn't there, Eliza felt the last of her resistance crumbling. She was trapped in a web that had been 15 years in the making, bound by forces she couldn't fight or escape. The trap had finally closed completely around her. And the worst part was that some traitorous part of her was almost relieved to stop struggling against the inevitable. Chapter 6. Eliza woke to the sound of shouting outside Sebastian's off-campus house. She'd been staying here for 3 days now, ever since Dr. Edward had declared her psychologically unstable and recommended immediate isolation for her own safety. The luxurious bedroom felt more like a prison cell, despite its silk sheets and expensive furnishings. She moved to the window, careful to stay behind the heavy curtains Sebastian had insisted remain closed. In the pre-dawn darkness, she could see figures moving through the trees that surrounded the property. They wore tactical gear and moved with military precision, but something about their movements was wrong, too fluid, too coordinated. Beautiful morning, isn't it? Eliza spun around to find Sebastian standing in the doorway, fully dressed in dark clothing that made him blend into the shadows. His eyes held a dangerous glitter that made her stomach clench with unease. Who are those people? She asked. Government hunters, Sebastian said casually, moving to stand beside her at the window. Agent Clark finally convinced her superiors to take more direct action. Eliza watched as one of the figures raised what looked like a rifle, scanning the house through a scope. They're here for us. They're here for you, Sebastian corrected. Clark knows what you are now. What you represent. The last pure alpha female can't be allowed to breed and strengthen our species. The possessive way he said our species made Eliza's skin crawl, but she forced herself to focus on the immediate danger. How did they find us? Does it matter? Sebastian's arm slid around her waist, pulling her against his side. What matters is that you're safe. Here, with me. Eliza tried to step away, but Sebastian's grip tightened. The blood bond pulsed between them, creating that familiar mix of need and revulsion that had become her constant companion. "We need to run," she said. "Get out of here before." "Run where?" Sebastian's voice was amused. "Clark has been tracking us for weeks. Her team has surrounded the house, the roads are blocked, and her hunters are equipped with specialized weapons designed to kill our kind." As if to prove his point, Eliza heard the distant crack of gunfire. Not regular bullets, something that whistled through the air with an odd, metallic sound. "Silver rounds," Sebastian explained. "Fragmentation bullets designed to cause maximum damage to werewolf physiology. Very effective, very lethal." "You seem awfully calm about this," Eliza observed, studying his face. "Why shouldn't I be?" Sebastian's smile was sharp. "My den is impregnable, my pack is well trained, and I have what they want most. Agent Clark won't risk your life with a direct assault." Eliza felt a chill run down her spine. "You're using me as a human shield." "I'm protecting my mate," Sebastian corrected. "And ensuring that the government understands the consequences of threatening what belongs to me." More gunfire erupted outside, closer this time. Eliza could hear howls in the distance, Sebastian's pack engaging the hunters. The sounds were violent and primal, full of pain and rage. "People are dying out there," Eliza said, horrified. "Hunters are dying," Sebastian said without emotion. "Good. They came here to murder us in our sleep. They deserve whatever they get." Eliza stared at him, seeing something cold and inhuman in his expression. This wasn't protection, it was a calculated use of violence to demonstrate his power. "How long have you known they were coming?" she asked quietly. "A few days." Sebastian's casual admission confirmed her growing suspicions. "Clark's surveillance isn't as subtle as she thinks. And you didn't evacuate? Didn't try to avoid this?" "Why would I?" Sebastian turned from the window to face her fully. "This attack proves everything I've been telling you. The government sees you as a threat. Without my protection, you'd already be dead." The realization hit Eliza like a physical blow. "You wanted this to happen." "I wanted you to understand your situation," Sebastian corrected. "Sometimes lessons require dramatic illustration." Eliza felt sick. The gunfire outside, the howls of pain, the risk to his own pack, all of it orchestrated to prove a point. To make her more dependent on him. "You're insane," she whispered. "I'm thorough." Sebastian moved closer, backing her toward the bed. "And effective. Tell me, Eliza, do you still think you can survive without me? Still believe you have other options?" Before she could answer, the bedroom door burst open. A man Eliza didn't recognize stumbled inside, blood streaming from claw marks across his face. He was one of Sebastian's pack, she realized, though she'd never been introduced to most of them. "Alpha," he gasped, "they've breached the outer perimeter. Harrison is down, and they've got some kind of new weapon." Sebastian's roar cut him off. The sound was pure predator, promising violence to anyone who threatened his territory. The wounded wolf dropped to his knees, baring his throat in submission. "Hold the line," Sebastian commanded. "No one gets past the inner defenses." "But Alpha, they're using some kind of chemical weapon. Gas grenades that make it impossible to shift. Then fight them as humans." Sebastian's voice was ice cold. "I don't care how many of you die. Protect this house." The wolf nodded and stumbled back out, leaving Eliza alone with Sebastian. She stared at him in horror. "You just sent him to die," she said. "I sent him to do his job." Sebastian's attention returned to her as if the interruption had never happened. "Protecting you is worth any sacrifice. I never asked to be protected. You don't get to make that choice." Sebastian's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You're too valuable to be left to your own devices." Eliza tried to pull away, but Sebastian's grip was unbreakable. Close to him like this, she could smell something else on his skin, a sharp, chemical scent that seemed familiar but wrong. "What is that smell?" she asked. "What smell?" But Sebastian's eyes flickered with something that might have been guilt. Eliza's enhanced senses, stronger now after her first transformation, catalogued the scent more carefully. Medical. Antiseptic. And underneath it, something that made her wolf recoil in instinctive rejection. "You smell like a hospital," she said slowly. "Like injections." Sebastian's hands dropped from her face. "You're imagining things." But Eliza was already moving, following the scent to his jacket hanging on the back of a chair. She rifled through the pockets, ignoring Sebastian's sharp command to stop, until her fingers found what she was looking for. A small medical case containing syringes and vials of clear liquid. "What is this?" Eliza held up one of the vials, her heart pounding. "Nothing that concerns you." Sebastian moved to take it from her, but Eliza darted away. "Everything about my body concerns me." Eliza read the label on the vial, her blood running cold. Synthetic estrogen? Follicle-stimulating hormone? The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. The mood swings she'd been experiencing, the way her body had been responding more intensely to Sebastian's presence, the dreams that had become increasingly vivid and sexual. "You've been drugging me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I've been helping your body accept what it needs to accept," Sebastian said calmly. "Your human half was fighting the mating process. The hormones simply encouraged your natural responses. You've been putting me into artificial heat." Eliza felt like she was going to be sick. "Making me more receptive to..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Making you ready to fulfill your biological purpose," Sebastian completed. "You're an alpha female, Eliza. Your body is designed to bear the next generation of our species. The hormones simply ensure that process happens on schedule." Eliza stared at the vials in her hand, understanding flooding through her. The inexplicable attraction she'd felt to Sebastian, the way her body responded to his touch despite her mind's objections, the increasing difficulty she had resisting his advances, it wasn't the blood bond alone. He'd been chemically manipulating her reproductive system. "You monster," she breathed. "I'm a realist." Sebastian's voice held no remorse. "Left to your own devices, you would have fought the mating bond for years. Possibly until it was too late to successfully breed. This way, we can begin producing offspring within months instead of years." The casual way he discussed breeding her like livestock made Eliza's vision blur with rage. She threw the vial at the wall, watching it shatter against the expensive wallpaper. "I will never have your children," she snarled. "You will." Sebastian's certainty was terrifying. "Your next heat cycle is due to begin any day now. The hormones have synchronized your system perfectly. And when it happens, you'll beg me to give you what your body craves." Eliza felt trapped, suffocated by the scope of his manipulation. Her body, her mind, her emotions, all of it perverted by chemical interference. The blood bond wasn't enough, she realized. You needed to stack the deck even more. "The blood bond creates dependency," Sebastian agreed. "But reproductive hormones create desperation. Combined, they're irresistible." Outside, the gunfire had intensified. Eliza could hear explosions now, and the acrid smell of smoke was beginning to seep into the room. But Sebastian seemed unconcerned with the battle raging around his territory. "This is why you orchestrated this attack," Eliza said, the final piece falling into place. "You needed me isolated, trapped here with you when the artificial heat kicks in. No distractions, no possibility of escape." "Very good." Sebastian's smile was predatory. "Your intelligence is one of the things I find most attractive about you. You're sick." Eliza backed toward the window, but there was nowhere to go. The hunters outside would kill her, and Sebastian would never let her leave voluntarily. "I'm dedicated." Sebastian followed her retreat, stalking her like the predator he was. "Do you have any idea how long I've waited for you? How many years I've spent planning for this moment?" 15 years, Eliza said bitterly. "Since I was 6 years old." "Since before you were born," Sebastian corrected. "I've been tracking your bloodline for decades, Eliza." Waiting for the right combination of genetics to produce a female like you. The admission made Eliza's skin crawl. You're talking about my parents. My real parents. Among others. Sebastian's casual tone made it clear he felt no guilt about whatever he'd done to Eliza's family. Bloodline purity requires careful cultivation. Sometimes that means removing inferior genetic material from the breeding pool. Eliza stared at him in horror. You killed my family. I eliminated obstacles to perfection. Sebastian's eyes glowed with fanatic fervor. Your parents were powerful, but they were also soft. Sentimental. They would have raised you to be weak, to value human concepts like choice and independence over genetic destiny. So you had them murdered and me raised by strangers. I had you raised by carefully selected guardians who would ensure your physical and intellectual development while keeping you isolated from pack politics until you were ready. Every revelation made Eliza's situation more hopeless. Sebastian hadn't just manipulated her recent life, he'd orchestrated her entire existence from birth. What about my guardians? She asked quietly. The people who raised me. Did you have them killed too? That was the FBI, Sebastian said dismissively. Though I suppose you could argue I'm indirectly responsible. If they hadn't been protecting you, they would still be alive. The casual way he discussed her adoptive parents' deaths broke something inside Eliza. These weren't abstract pieces on a chessboard, they were people who had loved her, cared for her, died protecting her. And Sebastian saw them as nothing more than temporary obstacles. You feel nothing, she said, staring at him. No guilt, no remorse. Nothing. I feel purpose, Sebastian replied. Everything I've done has been in service of a greater goal. The survival and advancement of our species. Your species, Eliza corrected. I want nothing to do with any of this. What you want is irrelevant. Sebastian's patience was finally beginning to fray. What matters is what you are, and what you can provide. He lunged for her then, moving with inhuman speed. Eliza tried to dodge, but the confines of the room gave her nowhere to go. Sebastian's hands closed around her wrists, pinning her against the wall with enough force to bruise. Enough games, he growled, his face inches from hers. You're going to accept what you are, accept what we are, and stop fighting the inevitable. Never. Eliza tried to knee him, but Sebastian anticipated the move and pressed his body against hers, trapping her completely. Then I'll make you accept it. His voice dropped to a whisper that promised violence. The artificial heat will begin within hours. When it does, you'll be begging me to touch you, to claim you, to give you the relief only I can provide. Eliza felt something snap inside her chest, not the blood bond, but something deeper. Her wolf, which had been gradually accepting Sebastian's dominance, suddenly recoiled in complete rejection. This wasn't mating, it was rape with extra steps. You're not my mate, she said with sudden clarity. Mates don't drug each other. They don't manipulate and coerce and force. You're just a predator who's convinced himself his obsession is love. Sebastian's expression darkened dangerously. I am your mate. Chosen by biology, ordained by genetics, confirmed by the blood bond. Forced by you. Eliza met his gaze without flinching. Everything about this is artificial. The blood bond, the hormones, the isolation. None of it is real. It's all real. Sebastian's grip tightened until Eliza was sure her wrists would break. And it's all permanent. You can hate me, Eliza, but you can't change what's been done. Maybe not, Eliza agreed. But I can choose how I respond to it. She had expected Sebastian to argue, to try to convince her of his twisted logic. Instead, his hand moved to her throat, fingers pressing against her windpipe just hard enough to restrict her breathing. Be very careful, he said softly. I've been patient with your rebellion because I wanted you to come to me willingly. But my patience has limits. Eliza stared into his eyes and saw the truth she'd been trying to deny. Sebastian wasn't just manipulative or obsessed, he was genuinely dangerous. If she pushed too hard, if she threatened his plans too directly, He would hurt her. Maybe kill her. The realization should have made her submit, should have broken her remaining resistance. Instead, it clarified everything. She wasn't his mate or his queen or the future mother of his children. She was his prisoner. And prisoners had different obligations than partners. I understand, Eliza said quietly. Sebastian's grip on her throat loosened slightly. Good. I knew you were intelligent enough to see reason. Eliza nodded, letting him see what he wanted to see: submission, acceptance, the breaking of her will. But inside, something cold and hard was crystallizing. Sebastian had made one crucial mistake in his 15-year plan. He'd taught her to be a wolf. And wolves, when cornered, didn't just submit. They waited for the right moment to strike back. Outside, the gunfire continued, hunters and werewolves locked in deadly combat. But Eliza's attention was focused entirely on the man holding her captive, memorizing every detail of his expression, cataloging every weakness she could exploit. Sebastian had won this round. But the game was far from over. And Eliza Fitzgerald was done playing by his rules. Chapter 7. The gunfire outside had died down to sporadic bursts when Eliza saw her chance. Sebastian had left the bedroom to coordinate with his pack, trusting that the blood bond and her apparent submission would keep her compliant. He'd been gone for 20 minutes, and the artificial hormones coursing through her system were making it harder to think clearly with each passing moment. Eliza forced herself to focus through the chemical haze. The window in Sebastian's bedroom faced the back of the property, away from where most of the fighting seemed to be concentrated. The drop was only 2 stories, and her enhanced healing should handle any injuries from the fall. She didn't let herself think about what would happen if she was caught. Didn't consider the blood bond's inevitable punishment or Sebastian's promised retaliation. There was only the desperate need to get away, to put distance between herself and the man who'd turned her entire existence into an elaborate trap. Eliza eased the window open, grateful that Sebastian's arrogance had made him careless about such details. The night air hit her face like a benediction, carrying scents of pine and earth that called to her wolf nature. For the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe. The climb down was easier than expected. Her enhanced strength and agility made navigating the ornate stonework almost effortless. Eliza dropped the last few feet into the carefully manicured garden, her bare feet silent on the dew-wet grass. Pain lanced through her chest immediately, the blood bond's response to her attempt at escape. But it was manageable, nothing like the agony she'd experienced before. Maybe the distance wasn't far enough yet to trigger the worst effects. Eliza ran. She moved through the shadows at the edge of Sebastian's property, staying low and quiet. Her enhanced senses painted a detailed picture of her surroundings, the hunters positioned in the tree line, their heartbeats elevated with adrenaline, the wounded members of Sebastian's pack retreating to defensive positions, the acrid smell of gunpowder and blood hanging heavy in the air. She almost made it to the woods before the howl split the night. The sound froze Eliza's blood in her veins. It wasn't the cry of a wolf in pain or the call of pack coordination. It was something far more primitive, the hunting song of a predator who'd found fresh prey. Sebastian had discovered her escape. Eliza ran harder, crashing through the underbrush with no regard for stealth. Behind her, she could hear him coming, not in human form, but as the massive black wolf she'd encountered in her dorm room. His howl was answered by others, and Eliza realized with growing terror that he'd called his pack to join the hunt. The blood bond was getting stronger now, sending waves of agony through her chest that made her stumble. But underneath the pain was something else, a dark thrill that terrified her. Part of her, the wolf part that Sebastian had awakened, was responding to the chase with excitement rather than fear. Eliza burst from the tree line onto a residential street, her feet bleeding from the rough terrain. The neighborhood was dark and quiet, most residents either evacuated or hiding indoors. She ran down the middle of the road, her enhanced vision easily navigating the darkness. A police car sat at the intersection ahead, empty but still running. Eliza's desperate mind seized on the possibility of escape. If she could reach the car, put enough distance between herself and Sebastian, maybe the blood bond would loosen enough for her to think clearly. She was 10 feet from the vehicle when Sebastian materialized from the shadows. He was in human form now, but there was nothing human about his expression. His dark hair was wild, his clothes torn from the transformation, and his eyes glowed with predatory fire. Blood streaked his hands and face, whether his own or someone else's, Eliza couldn't tell. Going somewhere? His voice was conversational, but underneath it was a rumble that spoke to every prey instinct Eliza possessed. Stay away from me. Eliza backed toward the police car, but Sebastian matched her movement, maintaining the same distance between them. 37 minutes, Sebastian said casually. That's how long you've been running. Longer than I expected, actually. Your conditioning is excellent. Conditioning? Eliza's hand found the car door handle. Did you really think this was an unplanned escape? Sebastian's smile was sharp as a blade. Eliza, I've been orchestrating your life for 15 years. Do you honestly believe I didn't plan for you to run? The words hit her like ice water. You wanted me to escape. I wanted you to try. Sebastian took a step closer, and Eliza felt the blood bond pulse with dark satisfaction. I wanted you to understand, once and for all, that there is nowhere you can go that I won't find you. Eliza yanked on the car door, but it was locked. The keys were inside, tantalizingly close but completely out of reach. The police officer who was driving this car is currently unconscious in the trunk, Sebastian informed her helpfully. Agent Clark's people have been neutralized, the area is under my pack's control, and every escape route has been sealed. You're lying. But even as Eliza said it, she could smell the truth on him. This had all been theater, a carefully orchestrated demonstration designed to break her will completely. I never lie to you, Eliza. I might omit certain details, but I never lie. Sebastian was close enough to touch now, and Eliza could feel heat radiating from his skin. The hunt was real. Your terror was real. The only thing that wasn't real was your chance of escape. Eliza tried to run again, but Sebastian's hand shot out and caught her wrist. His grip was gentle but unbreakable, and the moment his skin touched hers, the blood bonds sang with completion. No more games, Sebastian said softly. No more pretending you have choices you don't actually have. He pulled her against him, and Eliza felt her body betray her once again. Despite everything, the manipulation, the drugs, the psychological torture, her wolf responded to his dominance with instinctive submission. I hate you, she whispered. I know. Sebastian's free hand tangled in her hair, tilting her head back to expose her throat. But your body doesn't. Your wolf doesn't. And in the end, that's all that matters. Eliza tried to struggle, but the artificial hormones were making her weak and dizzy. Her skin felt hypersensitive, every touch sending fire racing through her nervous system. The approaching heat cycle was making rational thought nearly impossible. Please, she breathed, not sure if she was begging him to stop or continue. You're mine, Sebastian growled against her throat, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin there. Your body knows it, even if your mind doesn't. Something shifted inside Eliza's chest, not the blood bond, but something deeper. Her alpha heritage, dormant for so long, suddenly roared to life in response to Sebastian's dominance. Power flooded through her system, making her gasp with the intensity of it. But instead of making her stronger, instead of giving her the ability to fight back, the awakening alpha blood only made the bond between them more complete. Eliza could feel Sebastian's satisfaction as the connection deepened, becoming something that went beyond supernatural manipulation into the realm of fundamental truth. There, Sebastian murmured, his voice filled with dark triumph. Now you understand what you really are. Eliza did understand, and the knowledge filled her with despair. She wasn't just Eliza Fitzgerald, college student. She wasn't even just a werewolf trying to find her place in a hidden world. She was Sebastian's mate on the most basic genetic level, and no amount of resistance could change that fundamental reality. You didn't just want to possess me, she realized with horror. You wanted to own my soul. I wanted to complete you, Sebastian corrected. To give you access to your full potential. The woman you were before was a shadow, a pale imitation of what you could be. He was right, and that terrified her more than anything else. Eliza could feel the power coursing through her now, the alpha heritage that made her stronger, faster, more dangerous than any normal werewolf. But it came with a price, complete and permanent bonding to the man who'd awakened it. The other alphas in those videos, Eliza said suddenly. The ones who went insane when they rejected their mates. They weren't just any alphas, were they? Sebastian's smile was predatory. Very good. No, they weren't. They were specifically chosen examples, alphas whose bloodlines had been awakened and then severed from their bond mates. The psychological damage was considerable. You did that to them. To prove a point. I did that to demonstrate the consequences of resistance. Sebastian's hand moved to the back of her neck, fingers finding pressure points that made her knees weak. Their suffering serves a purpose, to ensure that you understand exactly what will happen if you continue to fight me. Eliza felt sick. The people in those videos hadn't been random examples of mating bond rejection, they'd been test subjects in Sebastian's grand experiment. Proof of concept for the psychological warfare he was waging against her. How many? She asked quietly. How many what? How many people have you destroyed to get to me? Sebastian considered the question seriously. Directly? Perhaps a dozen. Indirectly? Considerably more. But their sacrifice was necessary to ensure the survival of our species. The casual way he discussed murder made Eliza's vision blur with rage. But the alpha blood awakening in her system was teaching her something important. Rage without control was useless. If she was going to survive this, she needed to be smarter than Sebastian. More cunning. Agent Clark is still out there, Eliza said. She'll never stop hunting us. Actually, she will. Sebastian's expression turned satisfied. Agent Clark has been receiving very valuable intelligence from an anonymous source for the past 6 months. Information about supernatural beings, their locations, their weaknesses. You've been feeding her information, Eliza realized. About my enemies, yes. Rival packs, rogue werewolves, supernatural beings who pose a threat to my territory. Sebastian's smile was sharp. Agent Clark thinks she's been conducting a successful campaign against dangerous monsters. She has no idea she's been eliminating my competition. The scope of his manipulation was staggering. Sebastian hadn't just orchestrated Eliza's life, he'd been using the FBI as his personal assassination squad, turning their resources against anyone who might threaten his plans. The attack tonight? Eliza asked. We'll end with Agent Clark's team discovering evidence of a major supernatural threat that requires immediate relocation of resources. By tomorrow, they'll be chasing shadows in another state, leaving us completely alone. And the bodies? Your pack members who died fighting them? Casualties of war. Sebastian's indifference to his followers' deaths was chilling. They served their purpose. Eliza stared at him, finally seeing Sebastian Crow for what he truly was. Not just a manipulative alpha or an obsessed stalker, but a genuine monster who would sacrifice anyone and anything to achieve his goals. The people who followed him, the agents hunting him, even Eliza herself, they were all just pieces on a board he was playing with infinite patience and complete ruthlessness. You're not a werewolf, she said quietly. You're something else entirely. I'm evolution, Sebastian replied. The future of our species. Everything I've done, every choice I've made, has been in service of creating something better than what came before. And I'm your breeding stock. You're my partner in creation. Sebastian's hand cupped her face with deceptive gentleness. Together, we'll produce children who will remake the supernatural world. They'll be stronger, smarter, more powerful than anything that's come before. The hormones coursing through Eliza's system were making it hard to think, but one thing was crystal clear: she would never willingly participate in Sebastian's grand design. No matter how strong the blood bond became, no matter how her awakened alpha heritage tried to submit to his dominance, she would find a way to resist. The heat cycle, she said suddenly. When does it start? Soon. Sebastian's eyes glowed with anticipation. Within the hour, I'd estimate. Your body is already preparing for it. Eliza could feel the truth of his words. Her skin was becoming increasingly sensitive, her body temperature rising, and a deep ache was building in her core that she knew would soon become unbearable. And then you'll take what you want, whether I consent or not. Then you'll give me what we both want, Sebastian corrected. The heat cycle doesn't lie, Eliza. It strips away human concepts like choice and reveals the truth underneath. When it hits, you'll beg me to claim you. Never. We'll see. Sebastian's smile was confident as he lifted her into his arms. But first, let's get you somewhere more comfortable. The next few hours are going to be intense. As Sebastian carried her back toward his house, Eliza forced herself to think past the haze of artificial hormones and awakened alpha blood. She was trapped, bonded, and rapidly losing her ability to resist. But she was also learning things about Sebastian that might prove useful. He was arrogant. He enjoyed explaining his plans, demonstrating his superiority. And most importantly, he genuinely believed that the heat cycle would break her completely. Sebastian was right about many things, but he'd made one crucial error. He thought the wolf he'd awakened in Eliza would be submissive, compliant, eager to fulfill her biological role. But Sebastian had never been hunted by government agents, never had his family murdered, never been systematically isolated and manipulated. Eliza had. And the wolf he'd created wasn't the grateful mate he was expecting. It was something far more dangerous, a predator with nothing left to lose. The heat cycle might make her body betray her, but her mind was still her own. And Eliza Fitzgerald, alpha female of no pack but her own, was going to make Sebastian Crow regret every choice that had led to this moment. Even if it killed them both. Chapter 8. The underground chamber was luxurious in the way that prisons for valuable captives often were. Silk sheets, expensive artwork, a bathroom with Italian marble, everything designed to make Eliza comfortable while ensuring she could never leave. Sebastian had carried her here after her failed escape, and she'd been locked in ever since. 3 days. 72 hours of artificial heat cycles that left her weak and desperate, her body screaming for relief that only Sebastian could provide. He visited regularly, bringing food and water, checking her vital signs with clinical detachment. But he hadn't touched her the way her chemically altered body craved. Not yet. You're fighting it beautifully, he'd said during his last visit, watching her writhe on the silk sheets as another wave of hormonal manipulation crashed over her. Most females would have broken by now. Eliza had wanted to claw his eyes out. She'd also wanted to pull him down onto the bed and let him ease the terrible ache in her body. The contradiction was driving her slowly insane. Now, alone again in the elegant prison, Eliza forced herself to focus through the haze of artificial need. Sebastian's arrogance had made him careless. He'd left a leather portfolio on the side table, probably assuming she was too compromised to investigate. Eliza's hands shook as she opened it, but what she found inside made her blood run cold. Journal entries. Dozens of them, spanning years. All about her. Subject continues to excel academically while maintaining desired social isolation. Recommend increasing Dr. Edward sessions to 3 times weekly to monitor psychological development. First trial of synthetic pheromone introduction successful. Subject shows increased awareness of researcher presence during lectures. No adverse reactions noted. Hormonal treatments beginning to show desired effects. Subject's cycle has synchronized with projected timeline. Emotional volatility increasing as expected. Eliza flipped through pages and pages of clinical observations, detailed plans, psychological profiles. Her entire life reduced to data points in Sebastian's grand experiment. Subject demonstrates strong attachment to deceased guardians. This loyalty can be redirected toward researcher with proper conditioning. Isolation protocols working perfectly. Subject has formed no significant bonds outside of therapeutic relationship with Dr. Edward, controlled, and minimal interactions with roommate, monitored. Blood bond establishment, success. Subject shows increasing physical dependency. Recommend beginning next phase within 2 to 3 weeks. Each entry was dated, signed, filled with the kind of cold analysis typically reserved for laboratory specimens. Eliza wasn't a person in these pages, she was a project. A thing to be molded and shaped according to Sebastian's specifications. But as she read deeper, something changed in the tone of the entries. Subject's intelligence continues to exceed projections. Her questions during today's session demonstrated remarkable intuitive understanding of genetic principles. Almost as if she instinctively grasps concepts that should be foreign to her human mindset. Cannot stop thinking about the way she looked at me today. There was something different in her expression, recognition, perhaps? The awakening may be beginning sooner than anticipated. She dreams of running. I can see it in her eyes during lectures, that distant look that means she's somewhere wild and free. I want to run with her. The thought should concern me, but it doesn't. Eliza's breath caught. The clinical detachment was cracking, replaced by something that looked almost like longing. The blood bond is affecting me more than expected. I find myself checking on her constantly, inventing reasons to be near her. This level of attachment wasn't part of the original plan. She smiled at me today. Not the polite expression she uses with other professors, but something genuine. I wanted to tell her everything, what she is, what we could be together. Had to leave the room before I compromised years of preparation. I'm losing objectivity. The research protocols are clear about maintaining emotional distance, but I can't seem to follow them where Eliza is concerned. She's becoming more than a subject. Much more. Eliza stared at the pages, her mind reeling. These weren't the cold calculations of a monster manipulating his victim. They read like the confused thoughts of someone falling in love despite himself. But was it real? Or just another layer of manipulation, so deep that Sebastian had convinced even himself? The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside made Eliza slam the journal shut and shove it back where she'd found it. By the time the door opened, she was back on the bed, feigning the exhausted compliance that the heat cycle should have produced. But it wasn't Sebastian who entered. The girl looked about Eliza's age, with short black hair and intelligent dark eyes that seemed familiar. She moved with the fluid grace of a werewolf, but there was something haunted in her expression that spoke of terrible experiences. "We don't have long," the stranger said, pulling lock picks from her pocket and working on Eliza's restraints. "My mother's team is providing a distraction, but Sebastian will notice the breach soon." "Your mother?" Eliza's voice came out as a croak. "Agent Clark." The girl's smile was bitter. "Surprise. The FBI's supernatural hunter has a werewolf daughter. Ironic, isn't it?" Eliza stared at her. "You're Agent Clark's daughter?" "Beatrice Clark. And before you ask, yes, I know exactly what Sebastian Crow is capable of." Beatrice's hands worked efficiently at the electronic locks. "He held me for 6 months before I managed to escape." The revelation hit Eliza like ice water. "You were his prisoner too?" "His project," Beatrice corrected, her voice flat with remembered trauma. "Though I wasn't his primary target. Just practice for the real thing." She looked up at Eliza meaningfully. "For you." Eliza felt sick. How many others have there been? Too many. Beatrice's expression darkened. Sebastian's been perfecting his techniques for years, using women like us as test subjects. I was lucky, my bloodline wasn't pure enough for his ultimate goals, so he eventually lost interest. The locks clicked open, and Eliza felt the restraints fall away. She should have felt relief, but instead there was a strange reluctance to move. The thought of leaving this room, of putting distance between herself and Sebastian, sent the blood bond into painful spasms. "We need to go," Beatrice urged, but Eliza hesitated. "What if he's telling the truth?" Eliza asked quietly. "About the mate bond, about what happens to alphas who reject it?" Beatrice's expression grew fierce. "Eliza, listen to me very carefully. Sebastian Crow is a monster who's convinced you that his obsession is love. Whatever you're feeling for him, it's not real. It's trauma bonding, Stockholm Syndrome, chemical manipulation. Nothing more." But even as Beatrice said it, Eliza found herself wanting to argue. Yes, Sebastian had manipulated her. Yes, he'd used drugs and psychological warfare to break down her resistance. But there had been moments, genuine moments, where she'd seen something else in his eyes. Vulnerability. Longing. Pain that matched her own. The journal, Eliza said suddenly. What journal? Eliza retrieved the leather portfolio, flipping to the later entries. Look at this. These aren't the words of someone faking emotions. Beatrice scanned the pages, her expression growing increasingly disgusted. Eliza, this is textbook predator behavior. He's documenting his own psychological manipulation, probably to refine his techniques for future victims. But some of it is designed to make you feel special, chosen, loved. Beatrice grabbed Eliza's shoulders, forcing her to meet her eyes. I thought the same thing when I read my file. He wrote beautiful things about me too, made me believe that what was happening between us was real. It's all part of the conditioning. Eliza wanted to believe Beatrice, but something deep inside her rebelled against the idea that everything she'd felt was false. The connection to Sebastian went beyond rational thought, beyond the artificial bonds he'd created. There was something fundamental there, something that felt like coming home. You're not thinking clearly, Beatrice continued. The hormones, the blood bond, they're designed to create exactly this kind of confusion. But I'm telling you, as someone who escaped the same trap, it's not real love, Eliza. It's not real. The sound of alarms suddenly filled the air, echoing through the underground facility. Beatrice cursed under her breath. They've discovered the breach. We need to move now. But Eliza found herself backing away from the door instead of moving toward it. The thought of leaving filled her with a panic that had nothing to do with the blood bond's physical effects. I can't, she whispered. Yes, you can. Beatrice reached for her hand. I know it feels impossible, but once we get you away from here, once the artificial bonds start to weaken. What if they don't? Eliza's voice was desperate. What if I really am meant to be with him? What if everything he said about alpha genetics and mate bonds is true? Then you'll find someone else, Beatrice said firmly. Someone who doesn't drug you, manipulate you, murder your family. Someone who gives you choice. The mention of Eliza's murdered guardians should have sparked rage, should have reminded her of all the reasons to hate Sebastian. Instead, she found herself making excuses. He was protecting his bloodline, Eliza said, the words feeling foreign in her mouth. Making sure I ended up with the right mate. Beatrice stared at her in horror. Eliza, listen to yourself. You're defending the man who orchestrated your parents' deaths. They weren't my real parents, Eliza replied automatically, and immediately felt sick at how easily Sebastian's rationalizations fell from her lips. They loved you, Beatrice said desperately. They died protecting you. And you're going to dishonor their sacrifice by staying with their killer? The words hit Eliza like a slap, cutting through the chemical haze and emotional confusion. Her guardians had died for her. They'd known what Sebastian was, what he represented, and they'd chosen to protect her from him. How could she betray that sacrifice? But even as rational thought reasserted itself, Eliza felt the blood bond's influence fighting back. Physical pain lanced through her chest, and her body began to shake with genuine withdrawal symptoms. Sebastian's presence, his touch, his approval, her system craved them like a drug. I don't know what's real anymore, Eliza admitted, tears streaming down her face. I know, Beatrice said softly. And that's exactly what he wanted. Confusion, dependency, the inability to trust your own thoughts and feelings. But Eliza, you have to fight it. You have to choose to be free, even if every instinct you have is screaming against it. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Sebastian was coming, probably with reinforcements. In moments, any chance of escape would be gone. Choose, Beatrice urged. Right now. Freedom or captivity. Truth or comfortable lies. Your life or his obsession. Eliza looked at the open door, then back at the luxurious prison where Sebastian had kept her. She thought about the journal entries, the clinical manipulation mixed with what might have been genuine emotion. She thought about her murdered guardians, her stolen childhood, her manipulated adolescence. And she thought about the way Sebastian looked at her, like she was the most precious thing in the world. Eliza started to speak, but the words died as Sebastian appeared in the doorway. He took in the scene immediately, Beatrice with her locked picks, Eliza free of her restraints, the obvious escape attempt. His expression went through several phases: surprise, disappointment, and finally, a cold fury that made both women step back. "Beatrice Clark," Sebastian said conversationally. "I wondered when you'd try something like this." "Let her go, Sebastian," Beatrice said, stepping protectively in front of Eliza. "She doesn't belong to you." "She belongs to me more than she belongs to herself," Sebastian replied, his eyes never leaving Eliza's face. "Don't you, sweetheart?" The endearment, spoken in that familiar voice, sent warmth flooding through Eliza's system. The blood bond pulsed with satisfaction at his nearness, and she felt herself taking an involuntary step toward him. "Eliza, no," Beatrice warned. But Eliza wasn't listening to Beatrice anymore. She was looking at Sebastian, really looking at him. At the way his hands shook slightly with barely controlled emotion. At the dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping. At the genuine pain in his expression as he watched her stand with someone who wanted to take her away. "He's a monster," Beatrice said desperately. "He'll never let you go." Eliza stared at Sebastian, seeing the truth in Beatrice's words. He was a monster. He had manipulated her, drugged her, murdered people she loved. He would never let her go, never give her the freedom to choose someone else. And the most terrifying realization of all was that she didn't want him to. "I know," Eliza said quietly, her eyes never leaving Sebastian's face. "I know what he is." She walked past Beatrice, past the open door that represented freedom, straight into Sebastian's arms. "Eliza." Beatrice's scream of anguish echoed through the chamber, but Eliza barely heard it. Sebastian's arms closed around her, and the blood bonds sang with completion. The artificial heat cycle that had been tormenting her finally eased, replaced by a deep sense of rightness that terrified her more than any of his threats ever had. "Why?" Beatrice asked, her voice broken. "Why would you choose this?" Eliza looked back at the girl who'd tried to save her, seeing her own potential future reflected in Beatrice's haunted eyes. Freedom, independence, the chance to live an authentic life. "Because," Eliza said softly, "I think I love him." The words hung in the air like a confession or a condemnation. Beatrice stared at her in horror, while Sebastian's arms tightened possessively around her waist. "And even if it's not real," Eliza continued, her voice barely a whisper, "even if it's just Stockholm Syndrome and chemical manipulation, I can't imagine existing without it anymore." Sebastian's smile was triumphant as he pressed his face into her hair. "I told you," he murmured. "The bond doesn't lie." As security guards arrived to escort Beatrice away, Eliza closed her eyes and tried not to think about what she'd just chosen. Freedom or captivity. Truth or comfortable lies. Her life or his obsession. She'd made her choice. And she was no longer sure if that made her the victim or the villain of her own story. Chapter 9. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city reeked of rust and decay, but Eliza's enhanced senses picked up something else, the sharp tang of fierce sweat and the metallic scent of blood. Agent Clark sat bound to a chair in the center of the vast space, her usually composed demeanor cracking under the weight of her situation. "Where is my daughter?" Clark's voice was hoarse from hours of interrogation, but her eyes still blazed with fury and determination. Sebastian circled her like a predator toying with wounded prey, his movements fluid and unhurried. Eliza stood in the shadows, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of fascination and revulsion. 3 days had passed since her choice to stay with Sebastian, and the weight of that decision pressed down on her like a physical thing. "Beatrice is safe," Sebastian said conversationally. "For now. Her continued well-being depends entirely on your cooperation." "What do you want?" Clark spat. "I want you to call off your task force. Permanently." Sebastian stopped in front of her, his dark eyes reflecting the harsh fluorescent lighting. I want official documentation that your investigation into supernatural activities in this region has been concluded. You're insane if you think. Sebastian's hand moved faster than human perception, striking Clark across the face with enough force to snap her head to the side. Blood trickled from her split lip. I'm not negotiating, Agent Clark. I'm informing you of what's going to happen. Sebastian's voice remained perfectly calm. You're going to make the calls, sign the papers, and ensure that my territory remains undisturbed. In exchange, you and your daughter get to live. Eliza felt something dark and predatory stir in her chest as she watched Sebastian assert his dominance. The blood bond pulsed with approval, and she found herself taking a step closer, drawn by the display of power. My replacement will continue the investigation, Clark said defiantly. You can kill me, but the FBI doesn't give up. Your replacement will be fed false information, just as you were. Sebastian's smile was sharp. Did you really think all those supernatural beings you've captured over the years were accidents? I've been feeding your department intelligence for months, pointing you toward my enemies while keeping myself safely hidden. The revelation seemed to hit Clark like a physical blow. The Blackwood Pack massacre. The Cincinnati shapeshifter ring. Those were my competition, yes. Sebastian's tone was matter-of-fact. Every supernatural threat you've eliminated was someone who posed a challenge to my authority. You've been my unwitting enforcer, Agent Clark. And you've done excellent work. Eliza watched Clark's face cycle through shock, rage, and finally a cold understanding. The woman had dedicated her career to protecting humanity from supernatural threats, only to discover she'd been manipulated into clearing the field for the biggest threat of all. You used me, Clark whispered. I used your dedication to justice. Sebastian began pacing again, his movement hypnotic in its predatory grace. All I had to do was point you toward genuinely dangerous individuals and let your moral certainty do the rest. The reports you sent, the evidence packages. All real. I never lied to you about the threats those beings posed. I simply neglected to mention that eliminating them served my purposes as well as yours. Eliza found herself stepping into the light, no longer content to observe from the shadows. Clark's eyes immediately locked onto her, and Eliza saw recognition there, along with something that might have been pity. Eliza, Clark said quietly. You don't have to be part of this. Whatever he's done to you, whatever hold he has over you, there are people who can help. Help me what? Eliza's voice came out colder than she'd intended. Go back to being a confused college student who doesn't understand why she feels like a stranger in her own skin? Help you remember who you were before he twisted you into this. The words stung because they carried a grain of truth. Eliza could barely remember the girl who'd walked into Sebastian's biology class just weeks ago. That Eliza had been innocent, optimistic, trusting. This Eliza felt ancient by comparison, weighed down by knowledge and choices that had fundamentally altered her nature. I remember exactly who I was, Eliza said, moving closer to Clark's chair. I was nobody. A lost girl playing at being human while her true nature screamed to be released. Your true nature isn't this, Clark insisted. It's not violence and manipulation, Anne. And what? Eliza interrupted, her voice rising. Submission? Following the rules? Pretending that the world is fair and just when monsters like him exist to prove otherwise? She gestured toward Sebastian, who was watching the exchange with obvious satisfaction. The pride in his expression sent warmth flooding through the blood bond, and Eliza felt herself standing taller under his approval. Look around you, Agent Clark, Eliza continued. You've spent years hunting supernatural beings, convinced you were protecting humanity. But all you were doing was clearing the board for someone smarter than you. Someone who understood that the real power comes from manipulating the game itself. Eliza, Clark said desperately, listen to yourself. This isn't you talking, it's whatever psychological conditioning he subjected you to. Isn't it? Eliza crouched down so she was eye level with the bound woman. Or maybe this is the first time in my life I'm actually being honest about what I want. And what do you want? Eliza glanced back at Sebastian, seeing the dark satisfaction in his eyes, the possessive way he watched her every movement. The blood bond pulsed between them, carrying emotions too complex for words: desire, control, protection, obsession. "I want to stop pretending I'm something I'm not," Eliza said quietly. "I want to embrace what I am, instead of apologizing for it." "You're a victim," Clark said firmly. "Whatever you think you feel for him, it's not real. It's trauma bonding, Stockholm Syndrome." "Stop." Eliza's voice carried enough authority to make Clark fall silent. "You keep saying that what I feel isn't real, but you have no idea what real feels like for someone like me." Eliza stood, beginning to pace in unconscious mimicry of Sebastian's earlier movements. "Do you know what real feels like, Agent Clark? Real is having senses so sharp that the normal world becomes a cacophony of overwhelming input. Real is having strength that could accidentally kill someone with a casual touch. Real is having instincts that scream at you to dominate or submit, to hunt or be hunted, while everyone around you pretends that civilization matters." Clark watched Eliza's agitated movement with growing alarm. "Eliza. Real is finally meeting someone who understands those instincts," Eliza continued, her voice gaining intensity. "Someone who doesn't flinch when you show them what you really are. Someone who sees the predator in you and isn't afraid, he's attracted to it. He's manipulated you into thinking. He's shown me the truth." Eliza's shout echoed through the warehouse. "Every human I've ever known has looked at me and seen what they wanted to see: a good student, a nice girl, someone safe and controllable. Sebastian looks at me and sees a predator. And he's right." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Eliza could see the exact moment Clark understood that this wasn't just psychological manipulation anymore, it was genuine transformation. "You're not a predator," Clark said softly. "You're 21 years old. You should be worried about finals and boyfriends and what to do after graduation, not." "Not what?" Eliza's smile was sharp. "Not accepting that I'm a creature designed to kill? Not embracing the fact that I could rip your throat out before you could scream?" Clark's face went pale, but she held Eliza's gaze steadily. "You're trying to shock me. To push me away before you have to face what you're really considering." The perceptiveness of the observation made Eliza's chest tighten with something that might have been shame. Clark was right, part of her was performing, trying to convince herself as much as her audience that she'd fully embraced Sebastian's vision of what she should become. But another part, a growing part, found genuine excitement in the display of power. In the way Clark's pulse quickened when Eliza moved too close. In Sebastian's approving attention as she asserted her dominance. "Maybe," Eliza admitted. "Or maybe I'm finally tired of pretending to be something I'm not." "And what are you, really?" Clark's voice was gentle, almost therapeutic. Eliza considered the question seriously. What was she, beneath the manipulation and chemical bonds and psychological conditioning? Strip away Sebastian's influence, the artificial heat cycles, the blood bond, what remained? The answer, when it came, surprised her with its clarity. "I'm someone who's been caged her entire life," Eliza said quietly. "First by parents who loved me but never understood what I was becoming. Then by a society that demanded I suppress every instinct that made me different. And finally by you, by people who see what I am and immediately assume I'm a threat to be contained. We don't. You absolutely do." Eliza's voice hardened. "You've spent your career hunting people like me, convinced that supernatural abilities automatically make someone dangerous. Well, congratulations, Agent Clark. You were right." Eliza moved behind Clark's chair, her enhanced senses cataloging every detail of the woman's fear response. Elevated heart rate, stress hormones flooding her system, the minute tremors of someone fighting their flight response. "Eliza." Sebastian's voice cut through her growing excitement. "Come here." The command pulled at something deep in Eliza's chest, but she found herself resisting for the first time since choosing to stay with him. "I'm having a conversation. You're playing with your food." Sebastian's tone was amused but firm. "Come here. Now." The blood bond flared with discomfort at her continued disobedience, but Eliza held her ground. She's the one who's been hunting us. She's the reason Beatrice tried to rescue me. I think I have a right to. Eliza. This time Sebastian's voice carried enough alpha authority to make her knees weak. Come. Here. Eliza found herself moving before she'd consciously decided to obey, her body responding to his dominance despite her mind's rebellion. When she reached his side, Sebastian's hand settled on the back of her neck in a gesture that was both protective and controlling. Better, he murmured, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin there. You're learning, but you still need guidance. The casual way he discussed her like a work in progress made Eliza's newly awakened alpha instincts bristle with resentment. She was learning, yes, but not just what Sebastian wanted to teach her. What happens now? Clark asked, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. Now you make those phone calls, Sebastian said. You officially close your investigation and recommend that no further resources be allocated to supernatural threats in this region. And if I refuse? Sebastian's smile was cold. Then Eliza and I will pay a visit to your daughter. And I'll let Eliza practice some of the techniques I've been teaching her. Eliza felt a chill run down her spine at the casual threat. She looked at Clark's face, seeing the exact moment the woman's professional composure cracked. You bastard, Clark whispered. I'm pragmatic, Sebastian corrected. Beatrice means nothing to me, but she means everything to you. That makes her useful. Leave her out of this. That's entirely up to you. Sebastian pulled out a burner phone and held it toward Clark. Make the calls. End this. Your daughter lives, you live, and everyone goes home happy. Clark stared at the phone like it was a venomous snake. The moment I make those calls, you'll kill us both anyway. Actually, no. Sebastian's voice was conversational. Living witnesses who can testify to my reasonableness are much more valuable than martyrs. You'll make your reports, recommend case closure, and then transfer to a different division. Somewhere far from my territory. And Beatrice? Will be free to live her life, as long as she stays away from mine. Eliza watched the negotiation with growing fascination. This was Sebastian in his element, calculating, manipulative, always 3 steps ahead of his opponents. The display of intellectual dominance was intoxicating, even as it reminded her how thoroughly he'd outmaneuvered her own attempts at resistance. You can't trust him, Clark said suddenly, her eyes fixed on Eliza. Whatever promises he's made, whatever future he's painted, he'll dispose of you the moment you're no longer useful. Will you? Eliza asked Sebastian, genuinely curious. Never, Sebastian said without hesitation. You're not just useful, Eliza. You're essential. The future of our species runs through your bloodline. My children, you mean? Our children. Sebastian's hand tightened on her neck, sending heat racing through the blood bond. The strongest, most perfect predators ever born. Eliza felt something twist in her stomach at the casual way he discussed breeding her, but alongside the revulsion was a darker thrill. To create something powerful, something that would reshape the supernatural world, there was appeal in that vision, even if she hated herself for finding it attractive. Make the calls, Agent Clark, Eliza said quietly. It's over. Clark looked between them, her expression desperate. Eliza, please. Think about what you're doing. Think about who you were before all this started. I think about her all the time, Eliza replied. That frightened girl who jumped at shadows and apologized for taking up space. And I'm grateful she's gone. The lie came easily, but Eliza could feel the truth underneath it. She did miss that girl sometimes, missed the simplicity of her old life, the innocence she'd lost. But she couldn't go back, even if she wanted to. The blood bond, the awakened alpha heritage, the fundamental changes to her body and mind, they were permanent. Clark must have seen the finality in her expression, because her shoulders sagged in defeat. Fine. I'll make the calls. Sebastian smiled and began untying her hands. Excellent. You're making the right choice. As Clark flexed her freed fingers and reached for the phone, Eliza felt a strange mix of victory and loss. This was what winning looked like in Sebastian's world: the systematic destruction of anyone who opposed them, the careful manipulation of even their enemies into serving their purposes. Clark dialed a number, her movements mechanical. "Director Morrison? This is Agent Clark. I need to recommend immediate closure of Operation Nightfall." Eliza listened to the conversation with half her attention, more focused on the way Sebastian watched Clark's every movement. Even now, even with victory assured, he was cataloging potential threats and planning contingencies. The man never stopped calculating, never stopped positioning himself for maximum advantage. "It's done," Clark said finally, setting the phone aside. "Case closed, investigation terminated, resources reassigned." "Excellent." Sebastian's satisfaction was evident. "You see how easy it is when everyone cooperates? What about my daughter?" "Will be released within the hour, unharmed." Sebastian checked his watch. "You have 30 minutes to leave the city. I suggest you don't waste them." Clark stood slowly, her movements careful and controlled. As she walked toward the warehouse exit, she paused beside Eliza. "It's not too late," she said quietly. "Whatever you think you've become, whatever hold he has over you, you can still choose differently." Eliza met her eyes steadily. "This is my choice, Agent Clark. Maybe not the one you'd make, but it's mine." Clark studied her face for a long moment, and Eliza saw something like grief in her expression. "I hope someday you remember what choice really means." She left without another word, her footsteps echoing in the vast space until the warehouse door closed behind her. Eliza and Sebastian stood in silence for several minutes, the weight of what had just transpired settling over them. Finally, Sebastian turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "How do you feel?" he asked. Eliza considered the question seriously. How did she feel? Triumphant? Guilty? Powerful? Empty? "Like I've crossed a line I can never uncross," she said finally. "Good." Sebastian's approval sent warmth through the blood bond. "That's exactly what's happened. There's no going back to your human life now, Eliza. You're truly mine." The possessive certainty in his voice should have made her angry, should have triggered her newly awakened alpha instincts to rebel against his control. Instead, Eliza found herself studying Sebastian with new eyes, seeing not just the predator who'd manipulated her life, but the creature who'd recognized what she could become. "Am I?" she asked quietly. "Are you what?" "Truly yours." Eliza moved closer, noting how Sebastian's pulse quickened at her approach. "Or are you mine?" Sebastian's eyes flashed with something that might have been surprise or excitement. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you've spent 15 years orchestrating my life, eliminated dozens of potential threats, risked exposure and war with the FBI, all to possess me." Eliza circled him slowly, her enhanced senses cataloging his responses. "That doesn't sound like the behavior of someone in control. That sounds like obsession. I told you from the beginning that you were my mate." "You told me I was your breeding stock," Eliza corrected. "Your genetic legacy, your perfect creation. But you never asked what I wanted to create." Sebastian went very still. "What do you want to create?" Eliza smiled, and for the first time since her transformation began, it felt completely genuine. "Something that belongs to neither of us. Something that chooses its own path." The warehouse fell silent except for their breathing and the distant sound of traffic. Eliza could feel the blood bond pulsing between them, but for the first time it felt like a connection rather than a chain. "You're still mine," Sebastian said, but there was a question in his voice now. "And you're still mine," Eliza replied. "The difference is, I'm not afraid of what that means anymore." She stepped close enough to touch him, her hands settling on his chest. Through the bond, she could feel his surprise, his arousal, and underneath it all, a vulnerability he'd never let her see before. "I choose this," Eliza said firmly. "Not because you've manipulated me into it, not because of chemical bonds or alpha genetics or any of your careful planning. I choose this because I want to see what we become when we stop pretending either of us could survive without the other. Sebastian's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentler than she'd ever felt from him. And what do you think we'll become? Eliza's smile turned predatory. Something the world has never seen before. Something that makes the FBI's nightmares look like fairy tales. When Sebastian kissed her, Eliza felt the last of her old self slip away completely. The frightened college student, the victim, the girl who'd believed in simple concepts like good and evil, she was gone. In her place stood something new. Something dangerous. Something that had chosen its own darkness and found it beautiful. The point of no return hadn't been crossing the line, it had been realizing she'd been born on the wrong side of it all along. Chapter 10. The FBI facility burned against the night sky like a beacon of destruction, orange flames licking at the darkness while sirens wailed in the distance. Eliza stood on the hill overlooking the compound, watching her handiwork with a satisfaction that should have horrified her but instead felt like coming home. Beautiful, Sebastian murmured beside her, his arms sliding around her waist. I couldn't have planned it better myself. Eliza's smile was sharp as broken glass. That's because you didn't plan it. This was all me. 3 weeks had passed since Agent Clark's forced cooperation, and Eliza had spent every moment of that time learning, evolving, becoming something new. Not Sebastian's creation, as he'd intended, but her own masterpiece, forged in darkness and tempered by choice. The facility below had housed the FBI's entire supernatural crimes division. Files on hundreds of beings like them, research into werewolf biology, weapons designed specifically to kill their kind. All of it reduced to ash and memory now. The survivors? Sebastian asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. There are no survivors. Eliza's voice held no emotion whatsoever. I made sure of that. She had, too. Methodically, efficiently, with the kind of cold precision that would have made her old self weep. But her old self was buried in the rubble below, along with everyone who might have remembered the frightened college student she used to be. Even Clark's daughter? Eliza's jaw tightened slightly. Beatrice had been the hardest to kill, not because Eliza felt guilt about it, but because the girl had fought like the trained survivor she was. It had taken creativity to corner her, patience to break through her defenses. Especially Clark's daughter, Eliza said quietly. She knew too much about your methods. About mine, now. Sebastian's approval washed through the blood bond, but Eliza barely noticed it anymore. The artificial connection had become background noise, easily ignored when it didn't serve her purposes. She'd learned to use it rather than be used by it, another evolution Sebastian hadn't anticipated. You've exceeded every expectation, Sebastian said, pressing his face into her hair. When I first saw you in that lecture hall, I knew you were special. But this is beyond even my wildest projections. Eliza turned in his arms, studying his expression in the firelight. There was pride there, yes, but also something else, a hunger that went deeper than physical desire. Sebastian was looking at her the way she'd once looked at him, with the desperate need of someone who'd found their missing piece. You're afraid of me now, she observed with amusement. I'm in awe of you, Sebastian corrected, but Eliza caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. She should be. In the weeks since her transformation completed, Eliza had proven herself to be everything Sebastian was and more. His manipulation had relied on patience and careful planning. Eliza preferred direct action. His control came from understanding human psychology. Eliza's came from understanding predator psychology. She'd taken his pack from him without him even realizing it was happening. The others are waiting, Sebastian said, nodding toward the black SUVs parked further down the hill. Eliza could smell them even from this distance, 13 werewolves who'd once followed Sebastian without question. Now they followed her, drawn by an alpha presence that burned brighter than anything they'd ever encountered. Let them wait, Eliza said, her hands moving to Sebastian's chest. We have things to discuss first. Such as? The future. Eliza's smile was predatory. Our future. What we're going to build together. Sebastian's expression grew wary. Over the past weeks, He begun to realize that the creature he'd created had her own agenda, one that didn't necessarily align with his original plans. "I thought we'd already discussed that," he said carefully. "You, me, the strongest pack on the continent. Children who will reshape the supernatural world." "Children, yes," Eliza agreed. "But not just any children. Carefully selected genetics from the strongest bloodlines we can acquire." She could see the moment Sebastian understood what she was really saying. His face went pale in the firelight. "You want to breed selectively," he said slowly. "Not just with me. I want to create perfection," Eliza corrected. "And perfection requires careful planning. Strategic partnerships. The kind of genetic diversity that comes from working with multiple superior specimens." Sebastian's hands tightened on her waist, his alpha nature bristling at the suggestion that he might not be enough for her. "I'm the strongest alpha on the West Coast." "You were," Eliza agreed pleasantly. "But strength isn't just about individual power anymore, Sebastian. It's about vision. About being willing to sacrifice personal desires for long-term goals." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Sebastian had spent years manipulating Eliza into accepting his vision of their future, only to discover that she had her own ideas about what perfection looked like. "You're talking about making me one of many," Sebastian said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm talking about making you my partner in something greater than either of us could achieve alone." Eliza's hands moved to his face, her touch gentle despite the sharp edges of her words. "Think about it, Sebastian. Instead of one perfect bloodline, we create dozens. Instead of ruling a single pack, we control an entire network." She could feel his resistance through the blood bond, but also his unwilling fascination with the scope of her ambition. Sebastian had always thought in terms of local dominance. Eliza was proposing continental conquest. "The other alphas won't cooperate," Sebastian said finally. "They will if we make them the right offer." Eliza's smile turned sharp. "Or eliminate them and take their bloodlines anyway." The casual way she discussed murder made something dark and hungry stir in Sebastian's eyes. This was what he'd wanted all along, not a submissive mate, but an equal partner in darkness. Someone who could match his ruthlessness and exceed his vision. "You're talking about war," he said. "I'm talking about evolution." Eliza stepped back, gesturing toward the burning facility below. "The old world is ending, Sebastian. Humans are getting too good at hunting us, too organized in their efforts to eliminate supernatural threats. We can either adapt or become extinct. And your solution is to become the dominant species? My solution is to become the only species that matters." Eliza's eyes gleamed with fanatic fervor. "No more hiding, no more pretending to be human when it suits us. We take what we want, eliminate what threatens us, and reshape the world according to our vision." Sebastian stared at her, seeing his own ruthless ambition reflected back at him but magnified beyond anything he'd ever dared to dream. This wasn't just about personal power anymore, it was about species supremacy. "The pack will follow you," he said quietly. "The pack already follows me," Eliza corrected. "The question is whether you'll lead beside me or become irrelevant to our future." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Eliza had outgrown her need for Sebastian's protection, his guidance, even his genetic contribution. She was offering him partnership, but on her terms. "What about love?" Sebastian asked, and for the first time since Eliza had known him, his voice held genuine vulnerability. Eliza studied his face, seeing the man who'd orchestrated her entire life laid bare before her. The predator who'd eliminated her family, manipulated her education, drugged her into compliance. The creature who'd shown her what she really was and given her the tools to embrace it. "What we have isn't love," she said finally. "It's something deeper than love. More honest." "What is it, then?" Eliza's smile was genuine for the first time in weeks. "Recognition. You saw what I could become before I did. I saw what you really were beneath all your careful planning. We're not mates, Sebastian, we're mirrors." She moved closer, close enough that her breath ghosted across his lips. "The question is, Can you accept being reflected by someone who burns brighter than you do? Sebastian's answer came in the form of a kiss that tasted like smoke and copper, possession and surrender all at once. Through the blood bond, Eliza felt his decision, not submission, but partnership. An alliance between equals who'd chosen darkness together. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Partners, then, Sebastian said. Partners, Eliza agreed. In everything. They walked down the hill together toward the waiting pack, the burning facility casting dancing shadows across their faces. Eliza could smell the mixture of fear and excitement coming from the other werewolves. They knew something fundamental had shifted tonight, that the hierarchy they'd known was gone forever. Alpha, one of the pack members said as they approached, though Eliza noticed his eyes went to her first before acknowledging Sebastian. Status report, Eliza commanded, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made grown predators bow their heads in submission. The facility is completely destroyed. No survivors, no recoverable data. The official story will be a gas leak explosion. And the other FBI divisions? Already receiving reports that the Supernatural Crimes Unit was disbanded due to budget cuts. All related cases have been transferred to standard criminal investigations. Eliza nodded approvingly. With the specialized hunters eliminated and their research destroyed, it would be years before law enforcement could mount another effective response to supernatural threats. What about the international agencies? Sebastian asked. That's phase 2, Eliza said, her smile predatory. We're going to pay visits to Interpol, MI6, every organization that thinks they can hunt our kind. By the time we're finished, the only humans who'll remember we exist are the ones we allow to live. The pack members exchanged glances, excitement and trepidation warring on their faces. This was beyond anything they'd imagined when they'd sworn loyalty to Sebastian. Eliza was proposing a complete reshaping of the hidden world. And after that? Sebastian asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. After that, we stop hiding. Eliza's eyes gleamed with dark promise. No more pretending to be human. No more accepting their rules, their limitations, their fear-based attempts to control us. We take our place as the apex predators we were always meant to be. She looked around at the assembled pack, seeing her own hunger for dominance reflected in their faces. These weren't followers anymore, they were the first soldiers in a war most humans didn't even know was coming. Anyone who can't handle that level of commitment is free to leave, Eliza said quietly. But understand, if you walk away from this, you walk away permanently. There won't be second chances or safe exits. None of them moved. Eliza hadn't expected them to. She'd chosen each of these wolves carefully over the past weeks, testing their loyalty and their capacity for the kind of ruthless action her vision required. Good, she said with satisfaction. Then let's go home. We have a new world to build. As the pack loaded into their vehicles, Eliza felt Sebastian's hand slip into hers. The blood bond pulsed between them, but it no longer felt like a chain. It felt like a shared heartbeat, a connection between two creatures who'd found their perfect match in darkness. Any regrets? Sebastian asked quietly as they settled into the back of the lead SUV. Eliza thought about the question seriously, cataloging everything she'd lost and everything she'd gained. Her humanity, her innocence, her ability to see the world in simple terms of right and wrong, all gone. In their place was power beyond anything she'd ever imagined, clarity of purpose that cut through moral ambiguity like a blade, and a partner who understood her nature completely. Only one, Eliza said finally. What's that? Eliza's smile was sharp and satisfied as she watched the burning facility disappear behind them. That it took me so long to stop pretending to be something I wasn't. Sebastian's laughter was rich and dark, full of the kind of joy that came from perfect understanding. They were monsters, both of them, but they were monsters who'd chosen each other, who'd found beauty in their shared darkness. As the convoy of vehicles headed into the night, carrying predators toward a future only they could see, Eliza felt something she'd never experienced before, complete and utter contentment. She was exactly where she belonged, with exactly the right person, pursuing exactly the right goals. The world had no idea what was coming for it. But Eliza and Sebastian knew, and that was enough. Their dark fairy tale was just beginning. Thank you for listening to this story. Subscribe for more exciting stories coming up.